Good afternoon all and welcome to the final Young People and Families Children Scrutiny Panel of the Municipal Year. Well done. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention, please, some housekeeping matters. There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm does sound, please follow the fire and emergency procedures applicable to the council house. Can I please ask that you use your microphones when you are speaking and that they are switched off when you are not, and that your mobile devices are either off or onto silent. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing by entering the Warspite room during the meeting. Councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting purposes. Apologies. Jake, do we have any apologies for today?
Thank you, Chair. Got apologies from Councillor Steele. Councillor Penrose is substituting. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Item 2, any declarations of interest on today's agenda? Thank you very much. And moving on to the minutes. Does the committee agree to the minutes from the last meeting? Councillor Wood.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was one item on page, I've written page 9, page 9. I asked a question which I'm not convinced the totality of the answer has been contained in here. I've raised it with Jake and he's going to check the audio queue if that's all right.
Is that okay, Jake?
Yeah, I'll check the audio and amend if necessary, but it's whether the committee wants to agree subject to those amendments, those minutes.
Do the committee wish to agree subject to those amendments? Can I get a vote, please? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, Chair's urgent business. I have none. Item 5, transitions and preparing for adulthood. Could I please welcome Councillor Aspinall and hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the report to the panel, please.
Thank you, Chair. The delivery of the Transitions Preparation for Adulthood project is a fundamental project in the One Children's Services programme, with the intention to help children and families at the earliest sign of need and to provide support ranging from advice through to specialist intervention. It aims to, in collaboration with all our key city partners, build on the existing transitions offer to develop a network of services, processes and interactions that are able to understand and predict the need and respond together to help children, young people and families at the earliest opportunity. Our vision, which has been co-produced with young people, is that all children and young people in Plymouth will have their voices heard and have the right support and ambitious opportunities for their futures. A multi-agency project board has been operating since October 2024 with 6 key priorities with individual work streams. Updates on progress and the impact for young people of all 6 work streams are described within the paper, which scrutiny members are asked to note today. This work's been a priority for a while, so I'm really pleased to see the board up and running. We know we need to start working earlier with our young people and their families to make sure that we make that transition, whatever that looks like for each individual person, as smooth as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Aspinall, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair, for this. This project is essential. It's going towards ensuring that we are enabling our young people to live meaningful and fulfilling lives when they are reaching adulthood. Children and adult services need to work more collaboratively to ensure that young people can easily access the right support and advice at the right stages in their lives in order to prepare for adulthood and live as independently as possible. We have already seen significant progress and I am committed to ensuring that this project makes a positive difference in delivering a better future for our young people. And what I need to make sure that you understand is that at 18, youngsters we take into adult social care those young people that are needing care and support under the Care Act. And that's the essential. So this project is really going to make sure that we have the right person in the right place at the right time. And certainly Stephen will be telling you a bit more about it, but I'm going to steal his thunder here and say we had an LGA peer review a couple of weeks ago, and they were very pleased with where we were going with this. And so both Jemima and I are committed to making sure that we get these decisions started to be made at an earlier stage in the child's life, because it's not right for somebody to get to 17 years and 364 days and suddenly think, oh, sugar lumps, what have we got here? And it's not right. So we need to bring that age night down. If we can get to 14, I mean, that would be absolutely fabulous. But I think we're being practical and understanding that it's going to take a little while to get that started that quickly. But Chair, it's great that we're on that journey.
Thank you, Councillor Aspinall. It's really good to have you both in the room at the same time, actually, because that was something I brought up early on when I was elected, was how do we go from CAMS waiting to adult social care mental health waiting, and this looks really positive. It's really, really good. I would just use my chair's position to ask the first question, if that's okay. I wonder if, it all sounds really good, the family hubs, the team around the family and things like that. I know how they work, they're fantastic, and it's a really good way of getting lots of people in the same room. It says on page 13 that it is offered to some families but not all at the moment, and I just wonder if that is going to be offered, and does it address the access to to services for the gap of the support between that time. Thank you so much.
Can we ask Stephen to come in here and explain a little bit more?
Just to introduce myself, I'm Stephen Beeston, I'm Head of Adult Social Care, and I co-chair the Transitions Preparing for Adulthood Board. Well, I co-chaired it with Lisa Linscott, who departed in January, so I'm looking after it, but it's really important, I think, that it's co-chaired across the two service areas. I don't know the answer to that question, because it's probably more in the domain of children's services, so I don't know whether David can answer that.
David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as set out on page 13, there is a hierarchy of offer, starting with the universal offer, which is available to all parents and carers and children and young people across the city, for example, delivered through our family hubs and our children's centres. And we are strengthening that universal offer that is available for all. We have it's been announced recently that we do have a 4th year of government funding on top of the 3 years funding that's been allocated to deliver our Family Hubs programme, and we're delivering that now throughout the primary and the secondary stage. So one of our challenges, and I'd be pleased if members could help us with this when you're in your communities and with constituents, is helping people to know and understand what is there and what is available from their local provision and accessing it, because we do have an awful lot of very good provision available, but we don't have enough of our families and our children accessing that at a universal provision. So if you've got any thoughts on that, that would be gratefully received. Then we move into those families that have either asked us for some specific support to help and support them through a period in their life, or professionals have said that they believe that the families could benefit from some support, and therefore those families are helped in what you will be familiar with within our early intervention and prevention work. And it's for those families that when they have an early help plan, which is often managed by another professional and not social care, for example, schools undertake a number of early help assessments, and for those children, they would then have a team around the school or a team around the family plan, which is to bring around the table with the family the professionals that can help them and support them at best, and then they work through what the right things are to help and support the families. So not all families have that. That would be as you move through the levels of engagement and intervention from professionals to have those plans.
Thank you, David. That makes a lot of sense. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ladies, for bringing this report to us this afternoon. It's very helpful. I see that on page 13 of the pack, it does talk about preparing for adulthood and referring people to the Plymouth Online Directory. What worries me about the online directory is its accessibility for parents to be able to access that with their young people. How easy is that access? Is there a fallback for people who don't access the internet in that way to be able to seek help? And just to add, Chair, I already promote my family hub in Plympton because I opened it.
Thank you, Councillor. Stephen.
Thank you for raising that. I think, yes, you're right, the Plymouth Online Directory does have some information, but it's not all accessible to everyone. And one of the work streams, work stream 6, is around universal advice and guidance. And that work stream is slightly behind schedule because of having the right support in order to move that work forward. But it's all about ensuring there's clear and easy to access information that people can digest, advice and guidance for children, young people and their parents. So that work is part of this project. And we will continue to ensure that we really have that local offer to parents and children in different ways. So it's not just through an online directory, but we're actually reaching out to people. And hopefully by working with people at a younger age, they'll be getting that information and advice through the support that we provide with them, alongside them. So yes, it's still an area that needs to progress further, but it's one of the work streams within the project.
I just want to bring Councillor Lang in a moment on that.
Oh, Stephen's more or less said what I was going to say. That a lot of it is very targeted, working with families and children and young people who we already know. It's the main challenge is starting early enough to make it as smooth as possible. And I think that's what this board is going to really help us do, to start working earlier. As Mary said, you know, the aspiration might be 14. We're not going to get there for a while, but this is a big step change in how we're dealing with transition, certainly in my experience anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Beer.
I just wanted to make a comment really around what you were saying, because Stephen, it sounds like that people might still fall through the net because they're not accessing this in the way we'd like them to. Since I was elected in 2007, we've been talking about this, and I get it, that it's a big ship we're trying to turn around in the Panama Canal, and it's a huge task ahead of us to do that. I'm really worried about those that will fall through the net. That's my concern. So I just want that minuted, that I am concerned that young people may well fall through the net because parents or guardians may not be accessing the appropriate support that we want to put in place. But I will continue to promote the Family Hub in Plympton as the local councillor for that area. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you want to say anything? No. No. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. This is a really welcome report, because as you read the start of the report and you describe how some young people obviously come to a crashing crisis just before they turn 18, and then this has come out of it. So I really applaud how you've evaluated what's happening, taken on board feedback from people and come up with a really responsive response. Is there a danger for some families there could be saturation of support coming? How do you manage that whilst their children are enjoying their childhood and teenage childhood, and dealing with the issues that crop up for that individual child and a stage of development, and then the adult coming? Can I just have assurance that that's handled carefully on a case-by-case basis as well? Because there's a lot for some parents to take on board, and perhaps at some stage there could be an 18-plus old person in the home and an under 18 who would both be having children's social care, adult social care input.
Yes, I think what's important is that this is really person-centred and we take a whole family approach, and some of the national guidance is really clear on that. Children and adult services also operate in different cultures where children's services tend to be more protective and adult services are all about independence. So actually the way that those services work together is really key to this, and we need to avoid those silos. There's lots of national guidance around what good looks like, and I think some of the legislation is almost unhelpful because we have separate legislation for children and adults. We need to make that work together, and so it's proportionate really for the individual, and actually we're helping parents to manage expectations and to think about what the opportunities are for their children as they reach adulthood, and none of us magically become adults on our 18th birthday, do we? So it's almost a kind of a false, if at all, so that work continues, but once they're 18 and through into their 20s. So yes, it's very. We need to be person-centred and not just and not overwhelm parents, I think, as well, by having to think about it too much. Yeah.
David, I wonder if you could explain Team Around the Family and what it is.
So the team around the family is similar to what I described earlier, where we have the professionals that have got the skills and the experience to meet the needs of the family. So there'll be different professionals depending on the needs of the family. So building on what Stephen has said, that is about looking at the needs of the whole family, including the extended family, where that plays into the help for the individual children and family in the one place. So that is providing that support. We do have a real opportunity going forward with the government's new reforms for children's social care, because those reforms are centred on ensuring that we are providing the help and support as early as possible, and that the support is all the whole premise is all intervention and prevention for the whole family. It's family focused, it's family first. So that will reinforce, and our model and approach is including working with Stephen and adults to identify how we better integrate colleagues from all of our adult services, including our own services within the council.
Thank you, David. Councillor Lang, did you still want to come in?
I was going to add that, it might be worth noting, that we have Plymouth Parent Care Voice, and the issue of overwhelm that Councillor Stevens has raised might be worth running by them as a specific theme, I suppose, in terms of just sense checking that in line with this work and how we want to do it, just to make, and this might already be happening, so I might be speaking out of turn, but if I'm not, then it might be worth running it by them to sense check that we're not, by doing this good work that we need to do. I get what you mean. If you're starting to talk about this with our aspiration being at 14, we don't want that to be to the detriment of as happy and normal a childhood as anybody could want their child to have. So I wonder if Plymouth Parent Care Voice might have a role to play in just guiding us on this.
Jake, could we put that as a recommendation? Thank you. Oh,
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Can I ask another question? On page 19, it's linked because it's the same topic. PPVC Transition Preparation Adulthood Conference. Is that a conference that members here, if they wish to, could attend? And if so, when is it?
Yes.
Yeah, normally it's face to face, but there was an issue with the university venue, so it's an online session. They've broken it down across a week with lots of different sessions. So I would say yes, councillors could attend, and we could get the chair of PPCV to send that out, I'm sure.
Thank you.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Gilmore.
There we go, sorry. Thank you. I'm on the Parent Voice comments here, and one of the comments is that agencies work in a siloed way. Now, I'm coming from a teaching perspective here and thinking about safeguarding and issues slipping through the net, which can go horribly wrong. So maybe
putting the wrong interpretation on this, and I'm happy to be corrected if I've misunderstood that comment. But do you know what that parent voice was about? And is there something being done to address it? I have a kind of fear of siloed agencies. So could you reassure me, please? Thank you.
Yes, that's exactly what this work is trying to address around siloed working between agencies, particularly I think between children and adults. And that's why we need to work with people at the right time on an individual basis. So I think parents sometimes find that there's some cultural differences between the way services operate between children and adults. And as I mentioned, that there is specific legislation, but that legislation does also require us to plan with parents and young people for adulthood from an appropriate age. It doesn't specifically say it needs to be from 14 or 16 or 18, but I think what our commitment is that needs to be right for the individual, for the young person. So actually just this project has really helped, just through what we've done so far, it's really helped children's services and adult services to think and work together. We have monthly meetings where we talk about young people who are approaching at different stages, 16 to 18. We plan what's best for those people in terms of when we should become involved, when adult services should become involved. And so that involves Live Well South West, who provide most of our adult social care duties. And I think what we need to do now is to really look at actually have we got the right people, the right roles in the right places in order to make that transition feel more smooth. So it doesn't feel like siloed working, it feels smooth for parents and young people as they move into adulthood. So there's definitely more work to be done, but there has already been quite a lot achieved, I think, through the way that those services are working together and understanding actually what their roles and functions are and a bit more. So it's not just a handing over process, it's an actual working together with that young person process.
Is that okay? Councillor Lang, did you want to come in?
Only to echo what Stephen said, and just going from my own personal experience, that the way that this has now been gripped and this board and the way it's working is specifically to tackle that siloed working and just to change the way that we work as a whole council around this particular issue. And it's not something that we hadn't quite cracked the nut, but this project board and the 6 priorities gives me a lot of reassurance that, you know, that siloed working will hopefully become a thing of the past. It's about those teams working together, despite their different kind of legislative priorities and the way that they have to work under the law. We can still, as one council, change how we do transition work. And I think this is I think it's quite a transformational bit of work, actually. And I'm just really looking forward to, you know, us carry along the path of making a real success of this particular bit of work in the council, because it's so important for so many people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lang. Councillor Penrose?
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I think everything has been said, because I was going to raise exactly the same point that Councillor Gilmore did. But I was going to phrase it the other way around, saying, listening to Councillor Aspinall reading this, it does seem that you're really tackling the multi-agency cooperation. And I just was going to say, so is this little comment from the parent voice a sort of echo of the past and what you're trying to get straight? So I think you've answered it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Penrose. Councillor Wood?
Thank you, Chair. On page 14, it states there's various pathways that transitions can take, and it's including employment, independent living, community inclusion and health. Now, there's a Civitas report from 2023 that states that 14% of care leavers go to university, compared to 47% of those young people who didn't grow up in care. Now, where on those 4 bullet points would you state that those individuals going on to university would fall? And given that tuition fees are now £9,500, that is an enormous financial burden, I would say, with a student loan debt that I have, that of course grows with interest. So what support are we providing those individuals who choose to go to university? and ensure that they can make a very informed and large financial decision and ensure that they receive the grants and bursaries, etc., that they are entitled to.
So we are aspirational for our care leavers, and wherever they have got the ambition, the interest and the potential, we support them through our care leavers team and through our virtual school education team to go on to university and go on through a number of routes. The traditional A-level route is not right for some of those young people, but they can take alternative curriculum routes and go to university. So we want to increase our numbers in Plymouth alongside the national, you've highlighted to us the national gap. The gap would be wider when we look at the Plymouth data, we know that, and therefore we have got well-made plans in place to address that. In terms of the financial support, so the care leavers do have additional financial support from us as a council in accessing university, and their personal advisor helps them access everything that is available for them, and they are treated as a priority group, both by universities that they attend as well as by the council. So I don't know, and I will find out for myself and via Jake send round exactly the amount of financial support we do give, and whether we do cover the whole fees or not. But I'll find that out and I'll circulate that to members for interest. But certainly help, support and financial assistance is there.
Councillor Lang?
Yeah, and to add that individual universities and institutions do offer their own support as well for care leavers. And our skills launchpad, we have a specific worker now who works with our care leavers, and they can go there once a week and work very specifically around what they think they might want their future to look like. It might be university, that might not be the right thing. It might be apprenticeships or training or other avenues like that. But having and I haven't got the data here, but again, we can get that. Having that particular person whose role it is to work specifically with our care leavers about their future, again, is new-ish and is already having an impact in terms of offering pathways and encouragement. And, because sometimes it's quite daunting for any of us to go off to university, even if we come from a nuclear family. So if those young people need additional support, I think that the Skills Launchpad team are really geared up to all of that. And I went to visit them a couple of weeks ago, and I was so impressed with what they're doing. And I think having that named specific person through the virtual school who's looking at young people's futures is a really good addition to that team.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Stevens, did you have another question?
Yes, please. Could the not related to that though, but it's related to this. Could we have in about 6 months' time an update of what's gone well with this? What impact has it had? What's gone really well? What's better than expected? And what hiccups were there that might have been unforeseen? Because it'd be really useful to have that, because it's such an exciting venture.
I think
Thank
that's
you.
a really good shout, Jake. Well, we shall add it to the work programme. I'm going to ask the last question, if that's all right, that nobody else has any questions pressing. No. Going back to the parent-carer voice and the transitions between CAMHS and adult mental health is not good, as young people may not have a consultant. That's the first bullet point. I just wonder, now that we have the new legislation around young people, children and young people being victims and survivors of domestic abuse and being entitled to support in the same way as adults, I wonder, how are we going to deal with that, Stephen, maybe, if we've got an already stretched situation and now we're adding to it with more young people and needing that support that they haven't really looked into before?
Do you mean that demand is increasing and because we're getting better at it, that we're...
Well, I mean, we are getting better at it, and actually I do want to say on record that the the way this council's working towards tackling domestic abuse and the support that's around that is fantastic. But now that young people and children are survivors and victims in their own right, they are now entitled to the same level of support as the parents within that family. And I just wonder if that is going to add an extra stretch in an already stretched service, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something I know. I can have a look at that in terms of, because we have a work stream which is specifically around children to adults health provision, which I can feed that back to, and they're trying to make sure those pathways are clear, straightforward, from CAMS services to adult mental health services. So I can certainly feed that back and see if that is something which is a risk, and yeah.
Could I suggest that we invite, as part of the 6-monthly update that we've now put on the forward plan, the relevant colleagues that are in the working group from health to address that within their report, and also to attend the Scrutiny Board meeting so that we can have that discussion around. I mean, certainly from a children's services perspective, the Plymouth Children's Safeguarding Partnership has got 4 priorities this year. One of those is how the whole partnership helps and supports children that have experienced or experience domestic abuse better. So our staff are being skilled up through training programmes, better use of tools and resources, which is positive, but it doesn't quite answer your question about the expectation that young people are now supported in the same way as adults, and has our system addressed that new legislation? So I think that's the question which we'll bring back to the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Sorry to add confusion. Councillor Gilmore, we do need to quickly move on from this now.
It was just, as you were talking about updates, I thought Councillor Wood's question about university access was brilliant. And if we're doing a 6-month update, 6 months will be after some of the young people have left school. Could we include in that where they've gone? Have they got into apprenticeships or uni? I just wondered as you were talking.
Yeah, absolutely. The only reason I'm slightly hesitating is because we do have that through to the first corporate parenting group. So it might be a corporate parenting board agenda item that we can refer into Scrutiny Board in terms of providing the report for information. And then if you do have any other questions on it, we could take them at the first meeting. Would that be okay? Thank you.
You're happy with that? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 6, Local Area Send Improvement Plan Progress Report. Please can I hand over to Councillor Cresswell to introduce the report. Thank you very much, Councillor Aspinall. And Stephen. Councillor Cresswell, welcome. Would you like to introduce the
Thank you
report?
very much, Chair. Thank you. The Send Improvement Plan Progress Report, which I'm delighted to be able to present. And simply, this is basically a bit of a summary of the briefing which you've in fact had, and is very straightforward. The Send Improvement Plan Progress Report summarises the progress made so far against the Send Local Area Priority Action Plan. The update has been collated as part of the Send Critical Review across January 2025. The critical review took place in January 2025 and aimed to establish what progress has been made since the inspection to test what impact this is having on children and young people. The review had 6 distinct elements: a new local area send self-evaluation form, the SEF, Plymouth Parent Carer Voice, PPCV survey, a critical review workshop to review progress against the actions on the local area send improvement plan. The creation of a strategic case study from each of the 9 priority areas to demonstrate progress and learning since the inspection. Collaborative audits of 6 children, including multi-agency partnership auditing of the children's files and a visit to each of the children in their schools or settings. And discussion groups with children and young people in 3 mainstream schools about their experience, led by the participations team. Now, those final 3 elements were completed at the end of January, and therefore the findings are now being quality assured for full reporting purposes and have not been able to be included in this report due to the timing of the scrutiny panel. I don't know if there'll be any odd bits that you'll be able to add to that, probably in a verbal update if you ask. So the third aspect is the local area send SEF, which is the self-evaluation form. And that's been fully updated to represent and evaluate the current work of the local area to support children and young people with SEND and to be in line with the Ofsted local area SEND inspection criteria. The SEF is representative of the local area partnership and the document owned by all. I think that idea that this is actually a document that is owned by everyone is really important, and people actually have real buy-in. The team now have a robust governance in place which has a cycle of review and challenge to endorse what happens on a regular basis. And you'll see in the document you've got a link to the self-evaluation form, which of course, and some people will know well here, is a live document, so it can be regularly updated. The report includes a summary of the parent-carer survey findings, which have been fully analysed. All recommendations have been woven through the SEND action planning and next steps. The SEND Critical Review workshop was held with all partners on the 9th of January 2025 to review the SEND action plan. The workshop facilitated groups, included the DFE advisor and the head of SEND from Telford and Wrekin, who we have built up quite a relationship with, which has been very helpful, ensuring that therefore was that it was robust and objective. The workshop's findings were then moderated by the service director and head of SEND, and the findings are that of 55 actions in the plan. 7 are completed, and there is evidence of clear impact on children and young people. 31 are completed now and monitoring for evidence of impact on children and young people, and 17 are deemed not to be yet fully completed. However, for all of these, there are clear actions in progress, and the DFE advisor has endorsed the evidence base that will grow over the next 2 months. The main body of the report offers full detail of the progress identified across each priority area and the steps that have been taken to improve partnership working across the local area. Significant progress has been made in implementing the Plymouth Local Area SEND Improvement Plan. Key actions have been completed and ongoing efforts are in place to address remaining areas. The critical review and the action plan tracker provides evidence of the impact and effectiveness of these actions, demonstrating a commitment to improving outcomes for children and young people with SEND in Plymouth. And I just would like to take this opportunity at the end. We had a SEND Improvement Board meeting last week, which had lots and lots of positives, and I am someone who, is always looking for, improvement, and we're on an improvement journey, which is really important. And obviously people are held to account and such, but I think it's really also very important to communicate as well the progress that has been made and the credit that should be given to people working in our teams and in our teams across the whole of the city. And it was very positive, and Brian Gale, who is our DFE support, was actually very positive indeed, and we're certainly moving in the right direction. So thank you to everyone concerned.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cresswell. Would anyone like to add anything? Yeah.
But I think if there's any questions, I do have more updated information, because we have done the review and audit of the actual findings of the critical review. So I might be able to add more detail if there are questions today.
It's perfect. It's really positive to see, especially as there'll be less children leaving Plymouth. So that's really good to see. Councillor Christnack.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that concerns me is that recently there was unfortunate event that happened where a person with mental issues committed a murder of 3 innocent people. Looking at the reports that have been submitted, it looks like that several different organizations, because the person did not respond to help and support, that support group literally just washed their hands, and as a result of that, we ended up with innocent people losing their lives. My question is how robust we are in making sure that needs of those individuals that are on the receiving end of the services are being looked after, even if they refuse the help offered.
I think this question is probably actually out of order. I don't know if this is particularly relevant to what we are discussing in terms of our local send improvement plan progress and report. I don't know if that's, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that this is that question isn't actually relevant to this paper and what we are actually looking at, Councillor, I feel. Thank you.
Councillor Tippett.
Thank you, Chair. My question is looking at some of the key findings and recommendations, particularly on page 24, particularly number 3 and number 10, about improving training for SEND practitioners. I was wondering if any collaboration was happening with local NHS services with their Oliver McGowan mandatory training on learning disability and autism. I know the rollout so far has been very successful. I've been very lucky to go on that training myself in my role in healthcare outside of this. And so is there anything there so we don't have to reinvent the wheel where there is already successful rollout of up-to-date SEND training happening with our partners?
Councillor Creswell?
I think I think I'm going to ask the professionals to give some further answer on that, but obviously some of the work that's being done on the ordinary available offer and the work that's being done with our schools is really important, and the PINS project that's actually ongoing as well. So those are really important areas where we're actually focusing in on. I think you're probably also thinking in terms of joint training and work that might be going with both the local authority in our schools and such, and health. It's probably fair to say that some work is being done, is certainly in terms of early intervention, in terms of our family hubs as well. I think that's also fair to say. But specifically what you're asking, I don't know the specifics as far as that's concerned. I don't know if Lisa can ask any more.
Lisa?
Yeah, so the actual module that's live across all of the partnership was, we created it with the NHS, with the ICB, with LiveWell, and it took all of that into account, and it's been done with the parent carers, and that's been rolled out across the whole of the local area partnership. And we're about to launch the resource directory, that's for schools and all partners working with schools, and again, that's been co-created with the NHS, ICB and LiveWell, so that we are pulling all of that information into one space and one-stop shop for everyone who needs to support SEND children and young people.
Just ask for confirmation then that Councillor Tippett has referenced the Oliver McGowan training. Is that included then within?
It's not specifically included, it's a separate module. It's not something that we've said that the whole local area has to complete. I know there's a number of partners who are completing it, and especially across the NHS and health. That is something I could speak to health about to see if we can include that as the next wave of the mandatory training.
Can you put that as a recommendation, please, Jake?
Oh, thank you. This all sounds fantastic. The only reason I specifically raised that training that I didn't clarify in the first one is because of the centre on lived experience within it that I found so incredibly powerful when I attended that training. So anything that encounters that sounds awesome. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. I've done it myself too. It's brilliant. So yeah, absolutely take that back. Thank you.
Councillor McLean?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It's always really reassuring to see how robust the steps we're taking in this area are. I have a question in regards to AHCPs. Do we have updated figures on how often we're managing to hit that 20-week report window, and whether that can be shared with the group?
Councillor Cresswell.
We do have updated figures, and this was actually something which was specifically raised when we had budget scrutiny, and we are working on a I haven't got the figures in front of me, but working on a very positive trajectory, and admittedly part of the recommendation that's gone in as far as the budget is concerned is that there's an additional, I think it's £740,000 in specifically for making sure that we are on track with processing our EHCPs, and we are very much on track with that. And just in terms of there's obviously evidence that comes through which Lisa will have the actual figures, but there's also lots of anecdotal evidence as well which comes through in terms of I have had far fewer in the way of complaints coming through, but also speaking to several of our MPs and their caseworkers. They have actually remarked how they have noticed since September there's been a real improvement, and I know that's anecdotal. Lisa will have the actual figures there.
Lisa.
The 20-week is always going to be our biggest challenge, and that's because of the significant out-of-time plans we had coming into sort of the autumn term. However, I can report that we've just done the data for the end of January. We're 18% now, and we've been at 0% for a considerable amount of time, I would say nearly 12 months. So 18% of those plans issued in January were on time within 20 weeks, and we've identified another large number of plans that we think we can hit within February. What we're doing is we've got a really concise plan where we're taking from the out of time plans, but also making sure that we hit more and more of the 20 weeks as we go forward. And we're also improving our waiting well offer, aligned with what the NHS are doing, to make sure that when we do have families and young people waiting for a plan, it's not a pause and nothing can happen for them. We've rebranded the funding, we've rebranded the resource and the support that's available for schools to make sure that that waiting time doesn't significantly impact the progress they can be making.
Just to add one other thing as well, one of the things that came out of budget scrutiny is that we budget scrutiny, and of course this is a draft budget, and but one of the recommendations was to actually bring this back regularly to scrutiny so that you're able to actually see the figures, and it'll be a sort of regular item.
So, okay, Councillor McLean. Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. Page 24, it says education and school support, and you've mentioned there some special educational needs settings, but you've not mentioned Longhorse School. Is that not being part of this embrace? So that's one question. And the second question I wanted to ask, please, Chair, if at all possible, would be on page 24 again, service availability, where it talks about the first number one in there saying that older SEND children get support during school holidays. Can I have some more information regarding that, please, and what support is available?
Lisa?
I'm not sure what page I'm tracking on. That was page 24. I'm looking at my individual report. We didn't have the... Oh, sorry, from the PIAS.
Is the second one, number one, halfway down the page, service availability.
Okay, thank you. So these are the findings from the PPCV parent survey feedback. So this is what the parents told us that they would like more of. So they talked around the fact that they wanted increased number of sort of the wraparound care for older children during the school holidays. And this has come about because in terms of the what's available in the school holidays for children with more complex needs, with a higher level of SEND needs, families felt that some of the clubs weren't suitable for them, and there's a particular cohort around the deaf society, the children and young people, where they felt they couldn't access some of those. So what we've done is woven that into some of the plans to increase that provision around that support as well. I'm not sure where it mentions long course. Oh, at the top there.
page,
So again,
yes.
this is pulled straight from the voice of the parents and the parents and the families. So this isn't for us to mention. So this is the schools that parents specifically mentioned in the feedback that they gave through the survey for PPCV.
So does that mean that parents at long course weren't showing any engagement with this process?
No, not necessarily, but it means that when the families wrote their responses, they didn't mention specifically anything about long course school. So in the responses, many parents talked about Milford School, many talked about Heatherbridge and Cortlands as part of that, but they didn't name, it was anonymised, so they didn't have to name where their children were placed.
Hoping, Lisa, that's a good sign.
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe Jake, David, could we recommend to review the holiday and food programme? Maybe increase activities if that was possible?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We'll take an action too. We have just had recent notification that the council will receive funding for the holiday and food programme for the forthcoming year. So it's a really good time now. We can review it to, if we're having feedback to say that that's something the parents would appreciate, we can review it to put more into that programme for children with special educational needs, and particularly those with complex needs. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair. It's important that we're inclusive, and I'm pleased to hear that and looking forward to seeing it coming into fruition.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. Councillor Stevens, and then I'm moving on to the next item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I, on page 28, there's information there showing there's a significant reduction in suspensions of children on SEN support. My first question is, can you give me an example of how schools have actually changed their arrangements and strategies to bring about that welcome change, please?
Okay, I'll do a little bit. Isabel might want to come in because she leads some of this area. I would say it's about our communication with schools and the processes that we now have in place. We've significantly improved the way in which we track and monitor when suspensions are happening, and then those challenging conversations that happen with schools around challenging why a young person is being suspended, what is it that we can do to support. And our service now across education and SEND is much more aligned. So when we see that there's an increase in suspensions, we immediately go to see, well, what is the cause of that suspension? How can we support? Is there resource or provision elements, some advice and guidance that needs to happen so that we can prevent the likelihood of that escalating?
Councillor Cresswell?
I'll let Isabel come in, but I think there's also some work. I think the communication is absolutely key, and I think the work that we've done in with the place-based team and that whole theme of belonging as well, and that importance of everyone kind of buying in, and also I think it's worthwhile highlighting as well the work of the Vulnerable Pupils Panel, which was launched and held monthly and is a very strong multi-agency membership across local area partnership, and really supporting schools to reduce that risk of permanent exclusion for our most vulnerable pupils. And I think that's these are all really very positive steps in the right direction. And just to point out, I mean, it's one thing to see the percentages, but I think it's really important actually seeing those figures there, because we're talking about individual children and young people and the impact that will have on their lives.
David just wants to add something.
Sorry, could I just add for balance that it is great to see that those figures are improving, and that is continuing through the academic year, but I would just want to confirm that we have got some really focused work in place on helping children attend school more regularly for those children with special educational needs and disabilities. So our trend in attendance so far this academic year is not as strong as that. And we have had a number of children that have gone, whose parents have chosen to educate them at home during the course of this academic year so far. And there was a big conversation at the Special Educational Needs Board, as there was at the Improvement Board, about elective home education. And I think some of you were on the All Members briefing about that as well. So I just want to balance that whilst those two things are going well, we still do have some challenges around attendance and choice for elective home education.
Thank you, David. Isabel, do you want to add anything? No,
I do have a supplementary link to that good news of what schools are doing, because which I think is worth noting. Well done to Ernest Settle School and Elberton School, both of whom have had good Ofsted outcomes. But there's particularly mention about the flourishing achievements and attainment of children with additional needs and inclusion in those schools, and they're quite diverse localities. That's good news. And in that link to that statement, we hear a lot about training for staff and support for parents and so on. But what implicit work has been done to develop non-SEN children's understanding of children with SEN and their behaviours and needs?
I think I can't speak specifically for every school because every school will want to do this differently. I think for us it's about talking about this as if it's integrated and it's just part of our everyday life. And I think as more and more schools are becoming really inclusive communities, like you mentioned Ernest Settlement and several other schools who've recently had visits where they've had really fantastic Ofsted results. It's about them really thinking about bringing that into the community, into the space of the school case studies. So really sharing where good practice is happening and what's happening for those children and young people, sharing really great examples. I've been into many schools where they're having assemblies, where they've got councils, where we've got children with SEND and without SEND working together, promoting weeks when it's neurodiversity week, mental health week, and really talking about how it's just part of everyday life. And I think it's now about sharing that more widely so that every school can see how easily that can be done.
Councillor Cresswell.
I'm just going to say it's interesting actually, because what you've picked up about Ofsted inspections, I've been reading a lot of them, and that issue about inclusion within the school is certainly coming up as something that's being highlighted. And of course, it's going to be one of the areas that's going to be looked at under the new Ofsted framework and inclusion card. In fact, it specifically has inclusion. On something also related to that is reports coming back from Riverside, where the children from Milford satellite class groups are, and the feedback from that is very positive. It's going very well for those children and the staff. But also speaking to a teacher this morning from Riverside, saying how that's also having a really positive impact on the school and the children there as well, which is really encouraging.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cresswell. I am moving on to item 7 now. We are asked to note the report. Is that okay? Thank you. Item 7, pupil place planning report. Please can I hand over to Councillor Cresswell to introduce the report?
This is something we have to do on a regular basis, so it's fairly straightforward. Lots of figures though. The Pupil Place Planning Report summarises the information produced in the latest pupil forecast model based on the January 2024 school census data. The information is used to forecast the number of school places which will be required across primary and secondary schools in Plymouth. The birth rate in Plymouth has been in decline, and primary numbers have been declining since 2017-18. As a result, there will be declines in pupil numbers across the city. And of course, this is actually a national picture that's happening as well. For the academic year 2027 to 2028, we'll see a reduction of 13% across the primary age cohort. There will be reductions in all localities. However, the southwest and west appear to be the localities which will see the biggest reductions in numbers. It's expected that secondary school numbers will continue to grow until 2026-2027. Following, the numbers will start to decline. Following this, the number of secondary age children in Plymouth is forecast to decline, as you would expect as a follow-on from expected numbers and reduced numbers in primary. Through our SEND sufficiency plan, we are working with schools to develop resource provision for children with educational health and healthcare plans, as we were talking about really just now. One primary school is now confirmed, and we are moving forwards with planning in respect of the buildings. We are holding initial discussions with one other primary school and 2 secondary schools. In addition to resource provision, we are working with schools to develop a targeted funding model, which will start in April 2025. Funding model is for small cohorts of children with SEND in schools. Schools will need space to meet the needs of the children. So it's actually, and there's a lot of really good work that's going on as well, working with School Forum, looking at those possibilities of enhanced provision, enhanced allocation within our mainstream schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cresswell. Does anyone have anything they would like to add? No? I do have a question, but firstly, and this is in no way a question on the work that's going into this, because I know there's a lot, but I can't understand these graphs with those colours. We normally do the red and the green, and I've really struggled to understand them. That's just my query, that's all. But I just wonder if the council is producing a strategic pupil place plan moving forward. Isabel, please.
So we had a meeting with the Schools Forum the other day, and they've asked to receive this report, and also it's in the process of being updated. So there'll be a second report coming after April. Because what the schools were talking about was thinking strategically across their local area, across as part of that place-based work, to think about where the needs were in terms of pupil place planning. So it's a really positive direction of travel for our schools, and that conversation will start at primary phase, and then obviously it will move into our secondary phase as they start to see those numbers coming down.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned at the current lack of available capacity in our secondary schools, particularly at a time when the government's introducing a tax on education in the independent sector, which may put a greater pressure on the state sector. Now, within the report, we forecast a decline in the required number of primary school and secondary school places, explained by a declining birth rate. However, the subnational population projections from the ONS are still based on 2018 data. Now, since 2018, we know that there's been a large amount of net migration, and of course, there's been a large level of completed and planned house building in and around the city. Indeed, on page 45, it states that in the 2018 projections, it was estimated that there would be 27,700 women in 2021, yet this was an underestimate, as the 2021 census provided more accurate information that there were actually over 29,000 women. So how can we be assured that the forecast provided to us here for the required primary and secondary school places is correct and accurate? And I just say thank you very much for providing a shed load of data, because you know how much I like data.
I'm sure it was done just for you, Councillor Wood. Isabel? Yeah? Sue?
Although the ONS projections have underestimated previously, the number of women in the census that came out in the census, although it was higher, it's not translating into births, basically, because we get our live birth data from the NHS. So even though the number of females within a particular age range are increasing, it's currently not mirroring with the number of births that are happening in Plymouth. So we've taken that into account. So as we see the population of women fluctuating, we align our birth projections in line with that.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you for that answer. Specifically, if we look at then the subnational population from the 2018 ONS estimates, how can we be assured that we haven't missed large cohorts of individuals who may have moved to the country but are not recorded in the ONS data as having moved here and not part of the updated projections, to ensure that we do have the capacity for perhaps a number of pupils that will be coming here in the next few years or are already have arrived in the last couple of years?
I think what we're establishing here is maybe we need to relook at the numbers and look for the most recent ONS data, because actually there's a release of ONS data mid 2023, I think, which is even further on from the census. We'll use the census and bring it more up to date. So I think that's something we could take away and have a look at.
Thank you. Yeah, we have got that in as well. So the ONS provide projection data, and as well as projecting, say, up to into the 2040s, they will provide an estimate of previous years already gone. So they'll kind of backdate what they think has happened. So we do take that into account. So we are up to 2022 with the estimation of females living in Plymouth. So we're fairly happy that that's an accurate reflection of the female population in 2022. The next subnational population projections are due in May, so they'll update from 2018. So since the pandemic and Brexit both put a stop on them doing population projections in the intervening years between 2018 and now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you. I'm also thinking about the changes in role, the falling roles. So in my other life, I work for a teaching union, and we're in what we unappealingly call redundancy season at the moment. Now, I don't know if this is something where we as a council can have any influence with the big trusts, but in redundancy season, in education as everywhere, the people that are often take redundancy are the experienced, the really good long-term experienced teachers. And I look at these numbers and I foresee a future where potentially we've lost a lot of expertise in the city through the falling roles and the teachers who will leave the profession. And I wonder if there's any influence that we can have on that at all. And if there is, if you can tell me what might happen.
Lisa?
I think I just wanted to talk about the things that what we're implementing. So if we look at the targeted funding, for example, that is about giving funding to schools to really enhance their provision of SEND support before an education, health and care plan. One of those strands is to have small cohorts of SEND learners who can't quite manage a full mainstream curriculum. And part of that, the worry is that we won't have enough teachers and support staff to actually recruit to those spaces. So actually we might see some teachers leaving particular posts, but actually redirecting their expertise into some of those positions. And that is something that I'm talking to head teachers about sort of using the expertise that we have in the city to make sure that this is a successful model. So I think as we are seeing those falling numbers, we're also putting into place other possibilities for teachers to sort of sidestep in or to step up to in terms of the impact they can have on the SEND population of our children and young people as well.
Which, can I just add to that as well, which also, if you think in terms of your sort of job satisfaction in terms of being a teacher and being able to work in a very positive way and see you're having a real impact. And of course, we know that one of the problems has been the retention of teachers anyway. So I think this is I think what the very things that Lisa and her team are working with and doing are the sort of things which will actually help to promote that that real sense of, you know, because teaching is a vocation, that real sense of satisfaction and also that sense of knowing that you're having a real impact. And I think that'll be really important, and also being valued. And I think that'll be really important in order to be able to stem the issues that have been right across the country in terms of recruitment and retention of our teachers.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Are there any further? Councillor Stevens.
This is a joy for me, is what numbers and geography I've loved it. As soon as I saw that map, I thought this is going to be a brilliant meeting. It's, in a way, natural causes are happening here in terms of fewer children, capacity available to fulfil some of the strategic direction that we've welcomed around this room about enhanced provisions, but equally early years opportunities as well, if schools were to host early years as there's a government drift. But can I also point out that geographically, where there are vacancies in some schools, and I know not all schools are physically suited, in areas we've discussed in the past in this meeting about speech and language deprivation in young children, there are lots of vacancies around the city in areas where there's been greatest challenge for families and children there. So this kind of can give us leverage into discussions with continued discussions you're having with colleagues in schools about specialist provision, even if it's enhanced or just a special class in some of those areas. So that'll be good to see. And equally, if there was a sudden boom in population of England win the World Cup or something like that, I mean, it'd be so sad to lose their special needs provision.
Lisa.
You're pleased to know that all that data has been factored in, so we're making sure that where we are opening the resource provisions for children and young people with an education, health and care plan, we're targeting those areas where we know there's a significant need and that we do have families that would require that support. And it's the same when we're looking at the schools that are going to be taking on the small cohorts funding and the small elements there. We are looking at schools where we know there is that significant need and really working to secure community, a community approach, because what we don't want is to have young people travelling across Plymouth out of their community. And so the rationale really behind the funding and behind the increase of the resource provisions is that we've got parents and families attached to schools in their own community where they can seek the support as families, but they can also have that long-term support for their children as they grow up with SEND. And we're making sure we do that from primary into the feeder secondary schools, so there isn't a cliff edge at the end of a primary education as well.
Councillor Cresswell.
Just a quick addition to that, obviously that's really important, the not travelling costs, because we know that the cost, the massive cost that the local authority, we're not unique in that, in terms of travel costs, and also the advantage of being within your local community. And I think that's one of the absolute key factors there as well. One of the other positive things I'd say, which Isabel alluded to in quite a big way, is that the work that's going on at the moment with Schools Forum has been incredibly productive and really thinking of these things, Schools Forum thinking very much in terms of these things, wanting this paper in terms of that strategic approach as well. And I have to sort of pay tribute to Lisa Linscott, who actually did and I attend Schools Forum and has done so much work in order to, I think we've got a really good team working really well, the schools working together and really managing to achieving and move forward. We've still got a long way to go, but we're going in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cresswell. Any further questions? We are asked to note the report. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8, we can give Councillor Cresswell a break. Can I hand over to Susan London and Paul Stevens for the performance report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a look. We've given you the performance report for Q3. That seems very loud. For Q3. Q3 representing October, November, December. One of the things to note in here is for the children's social care section, so section 1, we have been able to update the benchmarking to the latest benchmarking available, which is the figures as at the 31st of March 24. So that's in there for you. Education, as we know, is a little bit behind on the frequency of updating the benchmarking. So we've given you the latest information that's available for each of those measures. Sorry.
I've just noticed I can update that further.
Okay, and we've Sue's just mentioned for the next meeting we can update the annual positions for the education. That's already done on the children's side, but we can do that for the next report for education. Again, just to remind you, if you love your data, Councillor Wood, there are the links at the very back of this report, which gives you a huge amount of access, and you could spend weeks in there if you're so inclined. So there's a lot of information available. And again, the report we go through, we give you the latest information possible. Sue and myself tend to provide the movement sort of performance statistics. It's gone up, it's gone down, how we compare against other authorities. And then the service, we work with the service to add in the service narrative. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Paul. Any questions? Councillor Beer.
This is my favourite question. It's in the reports again, all percentages, no actual real numbers of children, which I find more helpful than percentages. I'm not a great mathematician, I do declare, but it would be nice to know the actual numbers of children that are affected. And I'm looking at page 74 and the looked after children that are placed outside of the city.
So page 74, it does actually give you the number of children in the brackets.
Oh, yes, I've got that out. It does help, Stephen, Paul, if you wear your glasses, doesn't it?
We did take your, because I know you've mentioned this before, so wherever it makes sense to you, we've tried to put the numbers in there. When you start talking about tiny percentages, it loses its meaning. Where the only section I don't do it in my half, which is the children in care, or the children's social work side, is when we get to less than 5 children in care placements, because that's the FE expectation not to report less than 5, and I just mirror that. Okay.
Fantastic, thank you. I'll put my glasses on in future. But I am a great granny, so that's my excuse, all right?
Thank you very much, Councillor Beer. Are there any further questions? Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Chair. It says the children on our child protection plan is 21% above the England average. I just wondered why.
David?
First of all, hand to Vivian to answer that in relation to her more detailed
Vivian?
knowledge.
I'd expect to see an increase in the numbers of children on child protection plans in Plymouth as part of our response to the Ofsted inspection in 2022, where there were concerns around thresholds and decision making, and as a result of that we've improved the quality of practice that's led to more assertive decision making for families and an increase in numbers of children on child protection plans. One of the things that we want to do now in this next phase is make sure that they're the right children and that families are actually receiving the right kind of help and support to prevent those needs from escalating, rather than only receiving a statutory child protection intervention, which of course that is important where children are at risk of harm, but there will be a high proportion of those children where if we'd have provided different support earlier, we could have prevented that harm from emerging. For example, families where children are at risk of neglect, where we could have provided support and interventions to the family to improve parenting that might have prevented that safeguarding need. So I guess it's expected in terms of where we are in our improvement trajectory, but we would want it to come down from this point now as we become more confident and more proactive and preventative in our work with families.
Is that okay, Councillor McNamara? No further questions? Councillor Stevens.
On page 70, where it says the percentage of re-referrals within 12 months, there's an increase there. Is there an obvious area of need, a child's need, that tends to require a re-referral? Is there any pattern emerging?
I think those are a high proportion, thank you, Paul, a high proportion of those are children who are experiencing neglect, where we put an intervention in place with the family, we achieve some improvement, we would leave the family to it and it deteriorates again, and other professionals become concerned and we become involved again. So we've been doing a lot of quality assurance around our re-referral rates because it is too high. It's unacceptable that families should not have that kind of sustainable improvement and should repeatedly need assessments. So an intervention, a big priority in our improvement work over the last year has been improving the quality of assessments, so we really get to the bottom of things and not just superficially addressing concerns. We look at past history, we're making sure fathers are engaged, and but also that we're
building capacity better around the family to make the change and improvements more sustainable by holding what they're called family network meetings. So we make sure aunties, uncles, neighbours, friends, family, other people who are part of that family's life are included in the planning, so that when we step out, there's still that support in place. And also strengthening our early help system is a really key part of that, so that families have, they're well supported when the social worker isn't involved anymore. So, and we've still got more to do. The January performance figure on referrals is much better. 17%, I think, was in January.
17.
So, which is hooray, finally. But we have fluctuated a bit. So but we're really keeping a very close eye. And again, that's a really key driver in the reforms that we want to make. The next phase of our improvement is really making sure that families get help that makes the right difference, and that's sustained over time, and they don't need to keep coming back for more and more help, and it keeps escalating then.
A lot more preventative work.
Absolutely, yeah, more family help, more preventative interventions.
Can I just add a little bit there, because I'm always on the side of caution as well. Is yes, January was 17.4 or something like that. It is early days, and the measure we're looking at is looking at a rolling 12-month view. So that 17 will take a little bit of time to show in the rolling position. If that makes sense. And you need that sustained position until you start seeing it come down on that rolling 12-month position.
Thank you. I just want to come in, because that was kind of my question that I had written down, but I just want to probe a little bit further, if I can, please, Vivian. How, presumably, the re-referral comes from that 12-month period is from when they were first referred or when they were stepped down?
So it's a re-referral within a 12-month period. So when it was closed and then 12 months back to us, it's counted from that point. But we look at, with it, how many came back within 3 months, how many came back within 6 months. We know the numbers of children within that as well. But the high level indicator is that 12-month picture. And some families come back 4 or 5 times during that 12-month period.
So I just wonder, and I appreciate that we've just said that we need to wait a minute and see what's happened there. So I completely appreciate that. But I do kind of want to ask how long and how impactful is that team around the family work? How much is it long enough? Is it robust enough to stop them? And I guess later on we're going to talk about staffing, I assume, and I wonder if that is also causing an impact in not having enough time with the family in the first instance, so that they are coming back.
Absolutely. It is a pressure to keep caseloads at an acceptable level for our workforce. We can't keep families open forever to sustain that support. So there's definitely some workforce considerations that are impacting there, that our vacancy rate, our reliance on agency social workers, that where to really make change with a family, you need to build a really good relationship, and we're not achieving that for all families, given our recruitment, retention challenges at the moment, particularly for qualified social workers.
Thank you very much. I wonder, Jake, if maybe we could look at bringing that back after we see all the good work that's going into it and how that's making an impact. Would that be okay? Councillor Stevens?
Yeah, can I ask about, it's really good to note that there are much fewer children in unregistered arrangements now. So 4 on the data, but down to 2 because of the December issue. That's a significant change, and I know it was an anxiety shared by yourselves and elected members that was happening. Will it ever be naught?
We're really pleased that at times in Plymouth we've had 9 children in unregistered settings, which is really problematic for the children's planning, as you absolutely rightly point out. We want all of our children to be in high quality
registered provision. But yes, so it's great that we're at 2 at the moment. It's you know, we hang on to that with our fingernails at times. Those 2 young people are both in provision that is registered. But it's just not registered with Ofsted. It's registered with Care Quality Commission. It's mental health provision for those young people. One of those provision has become inadequate for one of those young people, and we're having to look at the moment about an alternative plan for that child, that young person. So that's a challenge for us at the moment. So it changes on a daily basis. At the moment we wouldn't have moved those children on because that provision was meeting their needs until very recently. So we weren't looking at getting to naught. So it unlikely that we would get to naught. But you know, we would want all of our children in registered high quality provision. You know, that's the key for us, and this is a good position to be in, best we've been in a long time.
Councillor Lang?
Yeah, I would echo that. I struggle with this because it, you know, to make it very clear, Ofsted know about this. There's nothing hidden about it. They know about it, but it is illegal. And the registration process is something that we've talked about. You know, it's very, it takes a long time to register a provision from, you know, a standing start. And that's something I've raised at various forums with Ofsted and our South West Lead members meetings when we have Ofsted or DFE representatives there. You know, can you look at doing something to speed up the registration process? Because it's just something I can't quite get my head around, that they know about these provisions. And quite often it's, you know, it's emergency provision that you've got to stand up because a placement's broken down for one reason or another. And the focus of it is making sure that child is safe somewhere that's appropriate for them, but in Ofsted terms. And also I find the 2 placements that we've got are CQC registered. So that framework is satisfied, but the Ofsted side of it isn't. So there's some reassurance in knowing that they meet CQC standards, obviously, but I don't know, I just find it a dichotomy that I still can't really get my head around, that it's illegal, but Ofsted know about it. But getting down from 9 to 2 is a real achievement. And again, I would just, a hint of caution that, you know, that could change overnight, but there's been a lot of work on it. And yeah, I think being down to 2 is very good. I don't know that we'll ever be at 0, although that would obviously always be the aspiration.
It is, yeah, it is mind-boggling. Councillor Penrose.
Thank you. Slightly related, I think. I noted that your fostering summit is tomorrow. And you've got this fascinating sentence about what will happen. I just wondered if you could elaborate. I know, you know, how important it is, and you're trying all the time to get more publicity about the need for foster parents. And there was that lovely bit about the couple who were awarded. But I just wondered what this high support and emergency fostering offers, what would that amount to in your summit?
Well, that's another innovation in terms of, we have young people who are in residential placements. A number, I wouldn't be able to say the numbers off the top of my head, David, 64. No, but we have a number who are ready to step down. That's not 64, yeah, is it? That's 20. But the high support foster placements aren't there for them. So if we could step them down, it would be better for them, most importantly, because they would be in a family home as opposed to a residential provision setting. And obviously, you know, the challenges on our budget are well discussed and widely known, and it would have an impact there as well. Vivian can probably talk you more through that bit of work, but it's a very specific bit of work to try to find those foster carers who could step up to that very high support. And just on the summit, we had our very first one this time last year, and it was very successful. We implemented most of the things, I think, that the foster carers talked about and told us about. We know that foster caring is largely, you know, we can advertise on social media, we can get articles in the paper or whatever, but by and large, it's a word of mouth world. And if we know that foster carers can tell other foster carers who might be with independent fostering agencies or people thinking about fostering that Plymouth is a council that listens to you, values you, changes our offer on their suggestions, then that is really, really powerful. And we know it's already having an impact in our approval numbers and the pipeline for our foster carers. But in terms of the high support, I think Vivian could probably give you a bit more detail about that package.
Vivian? Yes, there is more detail in the later paper that we've got on the Family Homes for Plymouth Children programme that's later on in the agenda. But this is a new scheme we've developed to provide not just additional financial support to our foster carers who are able to take children who have more challenging and complex needs, but also a better support package wrapped around them, including from our child and adolescent mental health services, our virtual school. But essentially the model has an additional £800 a month fee to carers, which because we would need one carer to be at home all the time to meet the needs of children. And so our foster carers it's enabling one of the foster carers to give up work essentially and become a full-time foster carer for us, and to consider taking a child with more challenging, complex needs who may be out of school, who will have lots of appointments, where they will need to be attending professional meetings. And so our foster carers are, it's opening up a different opportunity for them that some of them are really quite excited about. So we've got 4 or 5 already who are thinking about, well, actually we've had one carer who's already taken one of our children last week, who stepped down from a residential placement in the north of England to one of our foster carers, and that's going well. And 4 others who are in introductions and thinking about that. So it kind of just opens up a new opportunity for our experienced foster carers to help us with our children who are in residential placements.
Thank you, Vivian. So if there are no more questions, we'll have a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by a couple of members of the Youth Parliament. Welcome back, everybody. Before I hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the next report, please can I welcome Rocky, Eden, Scarlett and Sienna, members of the Youth Parliament who have joined us for this item and item number 11, Young Female Violence Prevention Programme. And if you noticed, David has been replaced by Vivian for a moment while he takes a call. Can I hand over to Councillor Lang, please?
Sorry, Chair, we're going to item 11. Did you say?
Sorry, item number 9 and then on to item number 11.
Apologies.
My bad, sorry.
Okay, thank you. And it's really nice to see you all here. So this report provides the latest update on progress against our improvement plan, which has been here a few times. That plan was put in place, as you know, following our visit from Ofsted in January 2024. I'm really pleased to see that there's continued improvement in the key areas that have been highlighted by Ofsted. In particular, I'd like to highlight the current consultation on the development of an integrated front door to children's services, which is a key first step in our implementation of the Children's Wellbeing and Education Bill. There's continued stability in the front door, with more families receiving targeted help, manageable caseloads being sustained, and good improvement in families receiving a timely assessment. There's been more positive progress evidence from our quality assurance work, and a very high proportion of children and families are being seen on time and having an up-to-date plan. The focused work to improve the quality of pathway plans for care experienced young people is working well, and progress in our young people being in education, employment and training as well is worth noting. Of course, there's always more to do, but what really stands out to me from this report is about sustaining where we've had real intense work. The worry when you kind of draw back from that and return to kind of business as usual is that you might lose that, but that isn't happening. That focus and that stability is continuing. The plan sets out some important further improvements, including ensuring that we maximise family and community resources and in planning with families, as Vivian talked about, and further strengthening earlier permanence for children in care. I'm confident that the service will continue to make the further improvements needed with support from our sector-led improvement partners and with the oversight of our independently chaired improvement board, which continues to meet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lang. So I believe you have some questions for us. Eden, would you like to go first?
Yeah. When we were visited, we spoke about services needing to be safe, kind and equal. And it was great that this was adopted in the plan, but can you tell us about how you are doing this, as it's not specifically mentioned in the report?
Vivian,
Well, keeping children safe is that, I think that features really strongly through the report, and that's been a really important focus for us as we make sure that any children who are at risk of any safeguarding needs are identified and protected quickly. So the report talks about numbers of children on child protection plans and timeliness of reviews for those children who have child protection plans, and I think the quality assurance evidence that would support that we have a safe system in place for children and young people. In terms of being kind, we have a real strong priority in the improvement plan around relationships between children and their worker, whether that's a social worker or a family support worker, and how that has been hard to achieve when we've had vacancies of social workers and we've had to bring in temporary members of staff, which isn't a good thing. It hasn't helped us build relationships and have that kind of approach. So we've been working really hard around recruitment of permanent social workers, and we've made some progress this year, but it's still really hard, and we've still got too many temporary members of staff. But we would still expect our temporary member staff to be kind, and we've been doing quite a lot of work with our managers and our workforce around the culture that we have in our service, which is about being respectful and being kind, and not just how we treat the people that we're working with, but how we treat each other as managers and staff. So around being really promoting a culture that is kind. So I think we've taken that forward well. Equal is one, you're absolutely right. There's not much in the report around how we have taken forward equal in this area of work. You might see it more in our SEND work, where we've been thinking about children with additional needs, children with speech and language needs, and how we make sure that those children are supported to engage in mainstream education, to have the same equality of opportunity and the same outcomes. So it's not, so those principles around equal, kind and safe have gone across all of our work in both education and children's social work. So you sort of might see it more in some places than others, but it's definitely. Yesterday we had an away day for our senior management team, David's management team, and equal, kind and safe were part of our discussion again yesterday. Are we really achieving it? How can we make this meaningful? We're, in fact, I think our next head conference with our head teachers is going to be called Equal, Kind and Safe, so that we can keep that focus on it. So hopefully you'll see that we've probably made more progress in some areas than others at this point in time, but we remain committed to that being the way we work, and being committed to those three principles and delivering them on them more comprehensively over time.
Thank you, Vivian. Councillor Lang?
I would want to add something on equal, actually, because I think one of the priorities around equality is in terms of our looked after children being in the right place for them. And I don't just mean the right placement, I mean the right geography. So we have children outside of Plymouth who should be in Plymouth because that's better for them. There's always going to be examples where Plymouth isn't the right and safe place for that young person, but where it is, we know that we do have young people who are not in Plymouth who should be, and I think that, and we're working really hard to address that. And so when I think of equality and equal in terms of that, it's equal access to a placement where they ought to be. And we're going to talk about it in a report in a minute about the family homes for Plymouth children. But we are creating our own provision in Plymouth, so there's more opportunity for children to have residential placements here. We're working really hard to increase the number of foster carers in Plymouth so that we have fostering placements. And as we talked about before you came into the room, we're working on a particular bit of work to have some foster carers who can deal with young people who have got some more complex and challenging needs, who are currently in residential placements, who could be in a foster placement if the foster carers were available, who had the right skills to support them to be in foster care. So I think, I don't know, until you said it, I didn't think of it in that way, but I think that is a real driver, because for those children to be in the right place for them, both geographically and a foster placement or a residential placement, whatever has been deemed the right, safest, best place for them, is a really big bit of work that we're doing.
And for my second question, how are you making sure young people's voices are being heard when writing these reports? So have any said things gotten better, for example?
Vivian? So we have kept checking in with you guys, and in the last quarter I've been back to Youth Parliament and to our young safeguarders to talk about progress and hear your views. And in specific areas of work, we're really making sure that we've got young people's views embedded in what we're doing. So Councillor Lang talked about our children's homes developments, and we're making sure that we really co-design those homes with our care experienced young people so that their views feed in all the time, you know, not just into a report at the end, but into the work as we go along. So we've got young people involved in our recruitment work, in our children's homes development. We did the ongoing work on the 3-year plan. We're just starting a piece of work, in response to some government reforms, which will really change the way we're delivering our support to families. And we talked yesterday at that away day on, you know, how do we get young people and families co-designing this with us, and making sure that we're asking key questions and listening to the views of children and families along the way. So it's embedded, I think, in a lot of what we're doing, and informs the reports that you see at the end, I hope.
Do you think that there's any area of your work where young people's voices can be better assimilated or increased? Do you think there's any opportunity to do that, or any necessity to do that?
So the children's homes work is one where I think we've got a really an crucial opportunity there to get that right and do that well. We've had to get the work started quickly, and so we want to make sure that that doesn't mean that we do it without thinking about, you know, what children think is important, what young people think are important. So we're going to do that better going forward. Trying to think of some other developments where we perhaps might need to strengthen it. That's my key one, I think, at this point in time.
Councillor Lang?
David and I had a conversation this morning, actually, where we were reflecting on the listening care councils, and how we had a model where and not to say it has to be me particularly or Dave, but we did used to go periodically to the meetings and meet young people ourselves, and we had a really quite good, you know, you said we did kind of model where things that were raised in those meetings, we would go away and, you know, either action, or if we couldn't, come back with a proper explanation about why we couldn't, and that worked quite well. I'm not entirely sure why that hasn't kind of continued, and it was a conversation actually that David and I had this morning, and that we'll have with Stuart, and we'll look at. I think we need to kind of revive whether it's a different model or how we do it, but just to make sure that they still have those channels, you know, straight to members and straight to David, to be able to challenge us and ask us things, or tell us what they think, you know, ought to be going to the corporate parenting board, or maybe to tell Councillor Riley things they think ought to be coming to scrutiny. So it's definitely something that we've got so much going on, but actually it's something that's been on my mind that I'm not quite sure, for me personally, how I've got that kind of conduit to young people myself. So it's definitely a bit of work that we're going to go away and do, and look how we can improve, because I think there's plenty to do there.
I think as well there's we try, and I know Councillor Lang and other colleagues try very hard to make time to come and see you on a Wednesday, especially when you do the mock councils. Those are always good, and we take things that you say in those, like when we had the conversation, Rocky, on violence against women and girls and stuff. So we take that away, and we might bring it in a different way, but we definitely take what you say. So maybe it might be that we could, David and I were just suggesting that maybe you choose a couple of reports each time to ask some questions on. I don't know, David, if you wanted to.
Well, I was thinking that actually we front load that even more, that from the forward plan, you could look at what reports are coming up across the year and decide which reports you'd like to actually be part of writing. So we move it even further forward. So that would mean when Vivian's writing her report, that you would come and talk to her about, and you would give her your views and your experiences of the report that then gets written into the report, and that you could also come to the meeting as you've done today and be part of the conversation about that report. So that shifts, it moves that, I think, into a stronger place, because the report will have your voice and your thoughts directly in it when it goes to scrutiny board, as well as you being here. So just put that forward as a suggestion.
Can we do that? Are you happy with that, Eden?
Yeah, I think we'd all be quite receptive to that. Thank you. That's important to
Can
us.
we know that, please, Jake? Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, could I also ask, I think you're helping us also on a young people friendly report, aren't you? On a template for that. So, yeah, and what would be helpful, I think, with that is if you could introduce it to the report authors yourselves and just have a little session where the report authors come to you. You can say why this is important for you, and frankly help them to write it in a language which is easily accessible.
Thank you, David. Yeah, quite. Can I move on to Scarlett for your question, please?
Yeah, so my first question is, what is the simple step-by-step plan for you to achieve the improvements that children, young people, parents and carers identified? So this is in page 10 of the children's services bit. Now everyone's going to flip their pages. Yes, I don't have to read them out. So what's the kind of step-by-step plan that you're thinking of that's going to achieve what the points that have been identified?
My laptop isn't connecting to the Wi-Fi, so I can't see what page 10 is. I've lost my report. Thank you, Stuart. So I think a key part of the improvement plan the approach that we've taken over the last year has been about stabilising our workforce, as I mentioned before. So we've had a really focused approach on recruiting and retaining permanent social workers across our service. We have around 200 social workers in the service, and 25% of them, so 40 social workers, were agency and some were vacant. So which really impacts on exactly the things that you're talking about, relationships and between the worker and the young person, which helps them to understand their plan, helps them to understand what's needed, what the work that's happening, and having a good relationship so they feel listened to, feel valued. We've made really good progress in stabilising our management team. So all of our senior managers are now permanent, but we've reduced the number of agency social workers. We've increased the number of permanent social workers, but it's still too many agency workers in the service. It's a national pressure. It's not just a local issue, and we've tried all sorts of different ways to attract people to come to Plymouth and make sure that we're investing in their career and keeping them here, but it's still challenging. So we've got a lot more to do. We're going to keep focusing on that. And the other side of that plan is then making sure that the workers that we have got are really highly skilled, that they're good at this, that they know how to communicate well with young people, to write. So our workers have been developing how they write all of their documents, their assessments, their plans. They write them to the child now, so they use language that is accessible and helps the child to understand what was the concerns at the time, and what is the plan in a family friendly and a child friendly way. So that's been a really key development. Some of our workers are really good at that. When you read their assessments, it really brings it alive, and you can kind of imagine that in the future, if somebody wanted to come back and have a look at what work was done with me, what were people thinking, that it would really help them to understand what the concerns were and why we were doing what we were doing. So it was really nice and clear. So I think those are the two things that have been absolutely at the heart of our improvement plan: stabilising the workforce and making sure that all of our workers were skilled in building relationships and communicating.
Thank you, Vivian. Councillor Lang?
I wanted to mention the You Can Do It awards that we have. We have three awards events every year for the different age groups, and actually our 18 plus care leavers one this year was the best attended one we've had, and everybody gets a certificate which the people that work with them feed into, saying, you know, their achievements, and when you see those certificates and you see the kind of individual nature of them and their achievements and what they've done and the progress they've made in that year is celebrated with everybody in the room. We have 2 at the Crown Plaza, which are you know, they're just really lovely events, and we have the older young people's event is here in the council house in the reception room. And that's one way for us as members to meet and talk to young people. And, you know, been a councillor for a while now, as have other people. And, you know, we're seeing those young people growing up, and it's a really, really lovely way to celebrate what they do. And I was just particularly taken by how many of our 18 to 25-year-olds came to that, because that's not people whose foster carers or people they live with bring them. They come of their own accord, and they want to come because they're, you know, they really are celebratory events. And also we have a corporate parenting board, which I chair. And at the end of that agenda, we have good news stories. So we'll hear about somebody's got into university, somebody's representing the country, I think, for trampoline, you know. So we get to hear about what they're achieving, and we'll write a card from the board, or I've been to a graduation of one of our young people who very kindly invited me, so that we have those connections. And it doesn't necessarily fit into those bullet points particularly, but certainly the not feeling judged. I really hope that those awards and those kind of interactions absolutely are not about judgment. They're about celebrating what our young people are achieving.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Is that?
I do just want to say, is there anything further that either of you can give on the question? I feel like the question was kind of missed in a couple of the responses. So it's about the step-by-step plan on how you can achieve the improvements for the children, young people, parents and carers that are identified in the report.
The bit that I would add, so I think the step-by-step plan is making sure we've got a permanent stable workforce, skilling them up and training them on key areas that need to improve. And I guess the final part of that is kind of in your next question, which is about how you'll see results, because the third part, key pillar of our step-by-step plan is then evaluating, making sure that the differences that we expect are actually happening. So we call it our quality assurance framework. So making sure that we're the things that we expect to be different are different in practice. So looking in a continuous way at the work that we do through our monthly audit process, or looking at the work that is done with children and families to make sure that outcomes, the practice is good, that it's changing, that it's improving, that people are doing things differently. So kind of closing that loop all the time and learning. So learning is a kind of continuous cycle that we're checking in all the time to see that we're making the changes that we think we should be making, and that they're making the difference for children and families that we want.
David, did you want to?
We did a really good piece of work with young people and with parents on the SEND action plan, which was to present the plan in a child and young person friendly way. And I wonder if we need to do that with our plan. So I think this is part of you saying we don't see what the steps are in your plan to improve. So we do have a 3-year improvement plan in place, which is set out. It is very adult speak, and it might be helpful if we could work with you as a group, or the right group of young people, to make that plan accessible to young people in a better way. So if that would be something you would want to work with us on, then I would delegate that to Vivian to follow that up with Stuart and find a way of doing that.
Jake has noted that, so it's in the minutes. Scarlett. Councillor Lang.
Well, I would reiterate what I'd said about the Listening Care Council in terms of the feelings, and certainly from my point of view, I accept and acknowledge, and we've already identified that that's something we need to restore, because I think it did work well before. and I'm not quite sure why it's kind of gone off the radar. So this is a very timely prompt because I do think that the young people that were involved in those groups did value. And as I said, actually, I think sometimes the more important thing is where you couldn't do what they were asking was not ignoring it or leaving it, but coming back and giving a proper explanation why you couldn't do that. So that's something that, I hope with Stuart and with David, that I really would like to accelerate. And this has been a very timely reminder that we need to do that.
And that's also in the minutes. Scarlett, do you have another question?
I do, yeah. So what are your priorities after this report, and how will we see results are having an impact on making a difference?
Vivian?
So priorities for us in the next phase are actually about making sure that families get help earlier, so that we're working with our colleagues in education and schools, education, health services, schools, to make sure that when families need help, that they get that help quickly and early, so that we're not waiting for things to become really complex or really problematic, that support is preventing needs from escalating. And we'll see the results of that, because we'll start to see fewer children needing to come into care, fewer children needing child protection support, and more families will be receiving that earlier help. And families will get the help they need the first time and one time, instead of sometimes families are needing to come to us 3 or 4 times before they get the help they need. So we'll see some real improved kind of patterns and trends and outcomes, but we'll also see children and young people will be telling us, that they're got a good relationship with their worker. They understand what's happening. It's making a difference for them. We'll have fewer complaints. We'll have more positive feedback from children and young people. We'll see that in our audits when we look at practice, that we're achieving the outcomes that we want for children, young people.
Thank you. Councillor Lang?
I think we have an item in this meeting before you came which looks at our data, and we talked about our re-referrals within 12 months, which is when I was on this scrutiny committee. I would always go to that one first, because that's a real indicator of we're getting things right, because families are having the right intervention for the right amount of time, which means they don't need to come back to us. We've done a lot of work on the MASH, which is the first contact that families will have. That's been a really intense bit of work, because we weren't getting things right there. And we've seen that is being sustained now, which is, really, really encouraging. So I think those are indicators that the plan is working. For me, care leavers and their outcomes and their futures is something that we need to keep working on. And when we see that more of those young people are in jobs or further education or education of some other kind, apprenticeships perhaps, then that will also be another real indicator that we're making improvements where we need to, and we are. That is beginning to happen. And also our recruitment of foster carers, Vivian talked about recruitment of social workers, how important that is to be able to have a stable long-term relationship with that person who's in that family and that child's life, but also getting more local authority foster carers will be another part of really delivering this plan. And again, we are making good progress on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lang. Does that answer your question, Scarlett?
Yes, there's just something I want to add quickly. So we do a national consultation called Make Your Mark, I think every year, roughly. And that kind of highlights young people's priorities from across the UK and sometimes specifically here. So how can you kind of take those priorities about what we voted for into account when you're making these plans in the future?
Yeah, so when we were designing our plan, we came and spoke to you, and you helped us shape the priorities. So it worked really well. That's why we ended up with a plan that had equal, kind, and safe embedded in it, because That's what you told us was important. So we can do that. Again, we can come and co-design this with you. We can agree priorities of plans with you, shape them with you through our mechanisms, whether that's with Youth Parliament or our Children in Care or our Young Safeguarders or our SEND group. We've got really good mechanisms, and I think we can use them well. We have used them well. We just need to keep that approach really at the forefront, don't we, in the early stages of our work. Stuart.
Yeah, if I just come in there as well, we did also talk about when we come back here to scrutiny in the forward plan, we're not here for that section, but build in maybe some of Make Your Mark, and certainly the young people are going through elections at the moment, so at the end of the month we'll know what young people have voted for, so how that can be incorporated into this process.
Thank you very much. Before I open the floor to questions from other members, do you have anything else you wanted to ask? No? So I have Councillor Wood. Anyone else for questions? No?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for those. They were properly skewering the officers, which is normally my job, so I'm going to follow that. And under 6.1, on timeliness and compliance, we identified that 56 require improvement to be good, and 20% of individual audit grades are highlighted inadequate practice for children and young people. Now, I appreciate the report states actions are identified to resolve these as part of the audit and moderation framework, but that is quite a broad statement. So would you please explain the precise reasons for what are some really poor and quite concerning numbers? I'm under 6.1 on page 93.
I think there are a really wide range of reasons why an auditor will identify that practice was not where it should be. I think a common reason is drift in the plan. So where actions were set out in the plan and they haven't been achieved on time for the child. And I think again, a common reason for that is one of the things that I've been mentioning about changes of workers disrupting progress for families and not achieving the outcomes that we want in the timescales that the family need. So a key to that has been improving our supervision, improving the management oversight of practice and the plan. So we've been working with our team managers, our service managers, as individually and in groups to make sure that all of our workers have timely supervision and that that's a really good quality and that it's tracking progress against the plan. So we always will look and see if there's one plan that we've come across in our audit cycle that's not good enough, we'll quickly put that right. We'll ask the manager to put it right and we'll make sure that's done. But also at a general level, we'll then make sure the learning feeds into training or team meetings or service meetings so that we pick it up for all children, that we make sure that that's addressed widely at the same time.
Is that okay, Councillor Wood? Thank you, Vivian. Councillor McLean?
Thank you, Chair, and also really lovely to have your voices in this discussion. I wanted to follow up on Councillor Wood's point because I do agree when looking at the feedback, it does feel like there's some work that's being done incredibly well and some work that really does require improvement. And I think often we really focus on that work that requires improvement, but I also think it's important to celebrate where we are doing well and where those plans are really successful. So what's being done to increase peer learning across those kind of that work, just to make sure that when positive work is happening, it isn't being drowned out by work that does need improvement, because I think one will feed into the other.
Yeah, we've got a series of practice weeks going on at the moment. So each part of our service is having a deep dive, a week where there's a range of quality assurance activities planned, observations with staff, discussions with staff, and we always focus within those. We have an equal weight to identifying good practice and identifying practice that still needs to improve further. So in all of our reports, we have a balance between areas of practice. We start with areas of practice strength. What did we find that was good? And highlight that and make sure that we celebrate success when we see it, and then follow on with, okay, but where else? Where do we still need to improve? So we try and take a really balanced approach. We've also been building a better library of good practice. So when we come across good assessments or good plans, good pieces of work with children, life story work, or we're building that library of examples so that workers can have a look. What does a good assessment look like? What does a good plan look like? And celebrate that. I think we're getting better at bringing good practice to David's attention. We get feedback from the judges in court, for example, about when a social worker gives good evidence or presents a good care plan, and we make sure we recognise that. And David will always do a note thanking people, or to the worker or the team, highlighting good practice when it's brought to his attention. So, absolutely, it's really important that we highlight good practice, and there is lots of it. It's just about our improvement plan is about being more consistent, so all families achieve that good practice.
Can I follow up on that quickly? I'm just wondering, how do young people and their voices feed into that example of good practice, just to make sure that their voices are kind of continued on through that?
In our audit programme, in our quality assurance work, our monthly audits, it's a requirement of the manager completing the audit that they make contact with the child and their parents and seek their views as part of our evaluation of whether something is inadequate, requires improvement, or good. And as part of our practice week, we make sure that we make sure we talk to children and young people as part of those weeks. So a recent week was on for care experienced young people, and the week included conversations with young people. So we end up with some really great quotes about direct experiences, both positive and for learning, that help us and feed into the improvement plan, the next steps plan following that practice week.
Thank you very much, Vivian. We are running over time, Councillor Stevens, so the last question, if you can make it concise, please.
It will be. I read about the December MASH meetings. The turnover wasn't great. Could that be predicted, given that time of year, staff sickness is likely to be heavier, and also maybe the need for MASH meetings might be higher because of the tensions around Christmas that some families may feel? So what lessons have been learned from that for next December's performance?
Absolutely. I think we knew when our bank holidays were, and we knew that we would have more staff taking time off. So it is disappointing that wasn't better planned for, and definitely lessons have been learned about making sure that we plan leave better over that period in the MASH next year. Well, it'll be in our integrated front door next year. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you very much. As there is currently an item between this and item 11, I would propose that we bring item 11 into item 10. Can everybody agree with that?
Yep.
Thank you very much. So, item number 10, Young Female Violence Prevention Programme. Please can I hand over to Councillor Lang to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. The reason that this report exists is because of a spike in October 2024 was noticed. The number of girls committing violent offences had nearly doubled from 20% of the whole cohort of children pre-pandemic to 38.5% in October 2024. Since this date, in total, the Youth Justice Service have worked with 19 girls and their families and carers whose offending was violent in nature. Much of this violence was outside of the home, appeared to be premeditated in nature, and was being uploaded to social media. Of the 19 girls who worked with the service, only one has reoffended, and it's taken time to build trusting relationships with these young women to understand the reasons for this violence, which has been predominantly put down to the result of peer pressure. So to prevent other children following a similar pattern, we realised that we needed to raise awareness in schools and have commissioned youth workers from Plymouth Argyle Trust to engage with groups in schools. Violence involving boys has seen a 6% year-on-year decrease. The majority of violence involving boys in the city is linked to exploitation through county lines. So while the progress made to date is positive, particularly in relation to reoffending, we are aware that female violence has increased in all local authorities in Devon and Cornwall and mirrors a national picture. So therefore we need to continue to work with schools to educate children of the consequences of violence for both themselves and for their victims. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lang. This was on the news, wasn't it, yesterday and this morning. Sienna, do you have some questions for us?
I do, thank you. So when we were discussing this the other week, we felt like there was a lot of ambiguity with what was being said and we didn't really quite understand. So my first question is, can we have more detail around the numbers so we can understand the issues better? So what was the levels of seriousness of the offences and how many of the 19 girls' offences were against strangers and filmed for TikTok like the report suggests?
Could I introduce Ian to that one?
Everybody.
Hello, Ian.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sienna. So in terms of that, we had 11 that we know of that we've actually seen physical evidence that they've been uploaded. And it's not just to TikTok, it's also to Telegram. And these are closed groups with invite only. So obviously that makes it difficult for us to access these. So out of those, there was 11 assaults on strangers that were filmed in various locations around the city. The most popular area of the city for the stranger assaults is in the city centre. In terms of levels of seriousness, the police wouldn't take anything forward if it wasn't a serious assault. So we've got everything from grievous bodily harm, where a child's head has been stamped on, down to physical harm where children receive cuts and bruises. On top of that, we are aware of other instances where it's been things like a fray, where there's lots of pushing, shoving. They don't always come to us. And those are the children that we're trying to work with in the schools to try and prevent their behaviour escalating into the more serious crimes that we've seen. So to answer your question, it was 11 children that we're aware of who have filmed it, but equally, this sort of work takes a long time to build a relationship. If I came to you, Sienna, and asked you about your life, you'd be thinking, who's this old man asking me these questions? So we have to build a relationship with that child before we get to know a lot of what's going on. And so as we've built a picture with them, we find out more and more. So we're aware of other children who have been involved, who haven't come to our attention as well, and other assaults that haven't resulted in criminal prosecutions. Does that answer your question, Sienna?
Briefly, might I just follow up on the strangers point? You say the word strangers. Is this just groups of girls going up to these people and just beating them up and causing harm, or is there some context behind it, or was there a situation that escalated?
So if I give you an example, the most serious one we had was in Drake Circus, where 15 girls attacked 3 girls that they didn't know at all. They just waited until they seen 3 girls come along, and then they went over and attacked them. This was premeditated in respect of they set up 3 different points of view to record the assault from, and they didn't know the girls at all. Other assaults we've seen, particularly in the Whitley area, is rival schools, where the children are assaulted because of the school uniform, basically. So I say strangers because it's not known to them. It's not like a gang related or a rivals or anything like that. And that's the spike we've seen. We're also seeing that in other areas of Devon and Cornwall as well, and children sharing on the same platform.
Sienna?
That's brilliant, thank you. My second question was about how the number of girls compares to the number of boys and male violence, as we felt like in the report it didn't specify that. We felt that the rate of male violence was happening at a higher rate than female violence, and we felt that wasn't specified in the report at all, so we wanted to just get some clarification on that.
So when you talk about rating, what we're seeing is this spike. So we're seeing more girls coming in the system than we have before. The number of boys has actually dropped. I think it does say in the report it's dropped by 6%. The difference between the violence that we see between boys and the girls that we work with seems to be that it's orchestrated by adults. A lot of the boys offending, where there's drugs involved, county lines involved, and we can identify adults who are exploiting those children and almost making them be violent and offend. We haven't seen that with the girls, and we haven't been told of that. So that it's different in that respect. But we have seen a decrease in boys' violence in the city. We do a lot of education with our boys around knife crime and trying to reduce the effects of county lines. A different part of the service that I also manage is our response to exploitation and county lines. Unfortunately, we see a lot of children move from county line to county line very quickly. So again, that's very slow pieces of work. That takes a long time to build those relationships. But I am confident that we've been successful in that. We've seen this drop. And also we work really closely with the police to try and disrupt the county lines that come in. So in terms of boys' violence, I'm confident that we've got a good grip on that, and that it is falling. And that's mirrored from the police, the data that we've seen in the police, coming through the police, and also in older, young adults who've moving on to probation as well. We've seen those numbers drop as well.
You didn't exactly answer my question. The question was on the numbers and not the percentages. I am very aware that the percentages have very well dropped. However, I reckon the number of them is still very much higher than it should be, and I reckon it is still going. There's still more people doing it as we speak.
Yeah, we've got 46 boys on to us at the moment for violent offences. The number of girls, I think it says there's 19. By the end of this month, we'll have only 11 girls left with us because their orders will have finished and hopefully they will not have reoffended. The reoffending rate amongst boys of the 46 boys is higher. We have at the moment, and I haven't got the exact figure, but last month it was 38% of the boys open to us reoffended with violence. So the number is 46 boys who are violent compared to the end of the month we'll have 11 girls.
Thank you very much. That answered my question.
Thank you, Sienna. Rocky?
So in the report, Plymouth Argyle mentioned a lot of times that they're trying to implement strategies and that sort of language, but what exactly are the trusts going to be doing in their work, and how are they going to be helping involve young people in the process of building their work?
So I don't know how much you know about Plymouth Argyle Trust, but they've got 120 youth workers who work with them, male and female, and they offer a wide range of programs. Not just, people often just think it's just going to be football. They'll offer a wide range of sporting interventions, but they'll also do a wide range of work around behaviour and work with families as well. In this instance, as I said previously, it's taken a long time to build the trust with young people. Unfortunately, when people offend, there's a lack of trust in the police, and also there's a lack of trust in us as youth justice workers when we come in and ask questions. So it takes us a long time to build that respect from them. So what we're hoping to do is utilise the skills of the youth workers who work with Plymouth Argyle, and what we want them to do is to go into schools and raise awareness. Now there is a kudos that comes with when they go in with a badge. We've tried to go in ourselves and talk to schools. Indeed, we've met with the designated safeguarding leads of all the schools, and this is advice we've been given to try this approach. So we're going to go in, and what we want them to do in the schools is to be raising awareness of the consequences of what happens to these girls when they do these offences. Lots of times, and particularly with the parents we've been working with, they're really surprised how quickly the child's behaviours escalated through the court, and the long-term effects that will have on the children. So what we're hoping to do with Argyle really is go in and do more group work. As I said earlier on, the 19 girls we've worked with, only one's reoffended, so we're confident once the girls have got to that point of offending, we can address the behaviour, but we don't want it to get to that point. We want to intervene early, and we want to do work with schools and help the schools. And the schools are also seeing an increase in girl violence as well. And that was reported back to us from the designated safeguarding leads. So the idea of Plymouth Argyle is to go in, utilise the skills and knowledge of their professional youth workers to try and raise awareness and prevent these children from escalating through the system.
Yeah, that answers my question quite nicely, actually. So the second question is, we were concerned in the report that some girls might not want to get involved with a football club due to some stigma or some, but that actually answers that quite well, as you've said that there are many female youth workers that they might be willing to trust. But the question is, you say that you're going to try and raise awareness, but what are you doing to look at the root causes and see if you need to involve more services and more intervention and prevention? And yeah, what else is being done to support these girls?
So the girls who have offended, I've got a lot of support around them, and indeed the victims. I think that it's important to talk about the victims as well who have been assaulted, and the level of support they get. If I'm being really honest with you, Rocky, a lot of the reason that we're asking Argyle to go in and try and build this is a new and developing picture. Nationally, we're seeing this spike, and there's interventions being run in London and in Wolverhampton, but there's no accredited programs to address this behaviour. And what I mean by that is, whenever we do anything, the programs have been through scrutiny of academics to look at if it works. We've got a thing called What Works, where we can go and get dedicated pieces of work and look at how to address behaviours. There's nothing for girl on girl violence at all. So we're working with the Youth Justice Board nationally, and Plymouth's heavily involved in this piece of work to try and address this behaviours that we're seeing nationally. The behaviours we're seeing elsewhere in the country is linked to gangs. We haven't really got that issue of a dedicated organised gang in Plymouth. So we're coming at this slightly differently. But to be brutally honest, Rocky, we're trying to learn. We've only just picked this up in as an issue, and that's what the idea of Argyle going into schools and coming back to us, and hopefully they're going to get different information from girls who haven't been involved in the system than what the girls are telling us who have been involved in the system.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. That answered my question. I was just going to wonder, as a side part to that question, there are organisations like Trevi and CAMS Trevi works with over 18s for violence against women and girls. Have you considered potentially working with an organisation like them to bring in a youth support under 18s, kind of like branch of that sort of organisation?
So we have Trevi. You're perfectly correct, because Trevi have been involved with us from the start when we first started noticing this. So this was raised at the Safer Executive, where all the agencies in Plymouth meet quarterly, and we discuss offences and offending behaviour and how we can make the city safer. And Trevi raised exactly those concerns. They're seeing a spike as well in mainly young women who were resident in a Trevi house, but also the level of violence that they're seeing from those women is high. We have looked at working with other organisations, and that's basically why we decided to bring in an outside organisation in Plymouth Argyle to help us with this. What I do want to get across is we've seen this spike, and it is starting to go down. However, we can't be complacent around that. So we need to continue to build the picture and work with other agencies. We're also working with the probation service and with the child-centred policing team to get information as well and see what works best. So we have reached out to other organisations, but in the end we decided to go with Argyle. And the two youth workers from Argyle are both young women who will be able to reach out and got experience of reaching out to these to groups of girls and worked exclusively with girls in the past. And also the two of them have been working in Cornwall with families of children whose parents have been in prison. And basically to try and change the behaviour of those children. So they've got a lot of experience of working with girls who have offended and also working with groups of girls.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. One more thing is, did we talk about in the 3-year plan earlier about you guys working with Youth Parliament a bit more to like co-plan some stuff? Could we bring this into what we want to do with you in Youth Parliament?
I think that is a very good suggestion, Rocky. Thank you. Are you're happy?
Yeah,
You're
I'm
happy
I'm
with your
finished.
answers? Thank you very much. They were really good questions, and I think everybody here will know that this is a real passion of mine, in young women specifically. And I think it's really important to understand that while we have these discussions around violence against women and girls, it does happen in the other way too. It is possible. There is a spike. I do wonder, and I'm quite interested, Ian, in learning the patterns that we're speaking about here, because obviously we're not seeing much in the way of a pattern, and there's not much in research, as you've stated, but there is lots of work going on around the city and further afield in, children with imprisoned parents, for example, and so on. So I just wonder how much collaboration is being done. Trevi were mentioned here, which is fantastic, and it is quite interesting also, given the whole violence against women and girls thing, that it is the football clubs that are doing a lot of the work around young female violence, Arsenal being one of them, just saying. But I just wonder if there's something that we could maybe look into as an authority, David, where, we do have, I was hoping we'd hear a bit more about the empowerment programme today, because I do think things like that are really important for our young women. Because, I do think that along the way somewhere there's a voice that they're trying to get out, and it's probably not being done in the right way, shall we say. So I just wonder if there's anything we could do to collaborate with other organisations, including the youth service, if that was possible.
So if I could just answer that, Councillor Riley. So nationally, the YJB, the Youth Justice Board, have took a lead on this, and they're collaborating best practice and going forward. And they've also, there's been a presentation to the Secretary of State for Justice as well around what we're seeing. And there's lots of evidence from America and from Canada. Now, quite often in justice, you hear this happens in America, that happens. We're very different societies, and I appreciate that. But we're looking at the learning from those organisations as well, and what they've learned, and how to engage these groups. Particularly the internet's the thing here for me that stands out the most. And that these it's being recorded. We have very little influence on what goes on the internet in this country, unfortunately. But we've raised it with the police nationally as well, and with the Home Office to try and get a lot of these sites taken down. If I'm being honest, I think there's very little chance of that because they're not based in the UK. But definitely in terms of female empowerment, the girls who are working with us, one of our social workers is very much trying to raise female empowerment with these girls, to make them understand they've got a lot of choices as well, and not to be pressurized into situations where they become violent by other girls as well. And we've been doing a piece of work around that at the moment, and that will continue.
That's amazing. Just before I move on to the next question, I just wanted to pick up on one of Sienna's points on her paperwork that she didn't actually say, that more charities are helping young men over young women in the city. Now, there are lots of organisations helping women in the city, young women especially, but I think there's something significant there that Sienna questions this. So I wonder if maybe the empowerment programme that we were talking about could be discussed with Sienna and the youth. That is your role, isn't it, Sienna? Do you want to tell everybody what your role is in the Youth Parliament?
I am the Deputy Elected Member of Youth Parliament, and I got elected on my campaign on violence against women and girls.
I thought that was important. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Ian, and for your questions. I particularly like the bit where you say you've not answered the question.
I love it, yeah.
And we all laugh. We're not laughing at you, we're laughing at them. Sorry. So we started to touch on it there. I am thinking about the victims of these crimes, the victims of any violent crime, and I'm sure many of us in the room have probably been a victim of violent crime. I need sympathy and support, but this is in my brain a little bit like victims of child abuse, whose the crime against them is on the internet forever and ever, and that adds an extra layer, in my view, to something which makes it very hard to move on from, I believe. And I have a sort of two-parter question on this. One is, what are we doing to support those girls who've been brutally attacked for a laugh and whose attack is now online with other people laughing at it forever and ever? And secondly, how do we get that message into schools so that the girls on the periphery of this, the ringleaders, maybe the ringleaders would do it anyway, but this large group of young girls on the periphery might take a moment and say, hang on a minute, I do not actually want to be part of this, because in PSHE the other week we talked about it and it was really chilling to think what that would be like. So it's a two-part question, very much about victims and preventing future victims.
So in terms of victims, traditionally we haven't been funded to do very much with the victims. However, that's changed this year, largely because of the Police and Crime Commissioner, who noticed the amount of victims who had serious long-term trauma, and no agencies were working with them. So for the first time, now youth justice services have got to offer the same level of support to victims as we do to the young people we work with. So that can involve, we've got CAMS workers in the team, we've got education support. We reach out in various different ways now. We've got a victim worker in our team, so every victim's contacted. It is voluntary, so it's got to be, whereas a lot of the children who are open to youth justice service will have intervention plans and be told what they have to do. The victims is all voluntary. However, for the first time, we started to reach out, and the Police and Crime Commissioner has put a directory together of all the victim services that are run in Devon and Cornwall. And I went to a meeting about this a few weeks ago, and I was absolutely amazed to find out how many victim services are run in Plymouth and commissioned that I knew nothing about. And I've been the service manager for 5 years doing this. So there's lots of organisations. So the victims now do receive that level of support. And then as part of your second part of your question about how do we reach out, well, that's the idea of Argyle going into the schools to raise awareness, to say what the consequences are for the children who get convicted, but also for the victims as well, to raise victim awareness and ask the children to put themselves in the position of the child who's being recorded and what would they feel. Our thinking behind that, and this is through the Safer Executive, is we need to raise awareness within schools to stop these children coming in. And Councillor, you're really right what you said about the girls who are on the periphery, because they're the ones that worry me. The ones who are doing the recording worry me because they don't get arrested. So who are these girls? They're the ones who are pulling the strings. We're having a lot of difficulty finding out who's doing the recording and who's uploading it. I think that'd be a real bonus for us if we could find out who was doing that and uploading it. But at the moment, the girls haven't told us who's recorded them, and the police haven't been able to find out who's uploading as well.
Sorry, can I ask a very brief subsidiary? Is obviously stamping on somebody's head is a crime. Is filming it and uploading it actually a crime?
No.
Okay.
It is for sexual offending, but not for assaults and violence, which again is something that we've raised through the YJB to say, could this be looked at a national level as well?
Councillor Lang.
I'm not Charities Committee, but I'm just thinking you might be thinking about a recommendation around that, because that's quite shocking. I didn't realise that myself. So something to the relevant minister around why it isn't and why it should be, and if it's not just a spike, which we're being told it's not just a spike in Plymouth. And actually, I really applaud Ian and the team, I just want to say that, for noticing this spike and really trying to get to the bottom of it. And I totally take your challenges, but actually, if there is a rise in a certain cohort in the city doing a certain thing, we have to do something about it. We have to try to get to the bottom of it. And I do think that the way that the youth justice team, our child-centred policing team work, is really to be applauded in Plymouth, and that's been shown, hopefully, you know, touch wood, in the lack of reoffending in the young women involved. But actually, as I say, far be it for me to come up with recommendations for this committee, but actually, flowing from your point, Councillor Gilmore, I think there is a letter that could be written from this committee.
Yeah, no, so it beggars belief, doesn't it, that that's a thing. And if we talk about prevention rather than cure, then absolutely that's the way forward. So I do, if everyone agrees, that we should have a recommendation around that. We could word it.
Can I just do it for me and can I sort of propose it again second?
Who would like to propose it? And second?
And then just a quick vote, please.
And a quick vote, please. Thank you very much. Councillor Lang.
And just to add a final thing around social media companies and their responsibility in this arena. And, you know, I know I was going to say it's a nettle, it's not a nettle, is it? It's a great big, you know, horrific plant that is a problem worldwide. But really, they get off scot-free in these scenarios. And actually, if those platforms weren't operating in that way, there wouldn't be an appetite for this kind of behaviour. So it's kind of a futile point I'm making, because I don't really know how we tackle that as a council, as a country, as a world, actually. But, you know, I just think it's worth mentioning that in all of that, the blame for the publishers of this stuff it doesn't even come into it, and that's absolutely scandalous.
It is very, so I know many letters, both from charities and other organisations, that have been written about social media, and you know, whilst it might sound futile, it's something that should continue, because otherwise at no point is there ever going to be a holding to account. So I think maybe we could have something thought of around that too. Put that in the same recommendation. Councillor McLeod.
I'm wondering if there might be a future agenda item on social media, and that's something we can bring Youth Parliament in on as well, because I think there's quite a string of issues that could roll out of a more focused session on social media.
Yeah, we'll move on to on to the work programme, but thank you. I have Councillor Wood next. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up, Ian, with on Sienna's question. So, of those known to you, stated that there were 46 boys and 19 girls. However, the example you gave earlier outlined that 15 girls were involved in one single incident. And on page 114, paragraph 3, you intimate there have been multiple incidences of offences where groups of young females have assaulted strangers and recorded the evidence for social media. So how can you be sure that we are appropriately engaged with all of those individuals who are involved in these offences?
In short, I can't be, because I can only deal with the children who come through the criminal justice system, who come to us. And when we look at these images and we can count 15 girls, but we don't know who they are. So the idea of going into schools and raising awareness is the only way that we can really try to address it. Often we spend a lot of time trying to identify people from social media clips, particularly when we had the immigration riots. We can't always, in short, we can't always be confident that we're working with everybody. And the only way we can do that is try to go into schools. Equally within the schools, we've got targeted support workers who work for the council, and they're raising awareness with the children. But unfortunately, I can't be 100% confident that we're working with everybody. In fact, I'm not confident we're working with everyone.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bia and then Rocky.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Chair. Well, a couple of things have come up for me whilst I'm sat here. I've had 18 years in the criminal justice system, working with children and young people, giving evidence against perpetrators of sexual exploitation and domestic violence. What I did notice in my career was that there was a trait of younger children starting to show violent behaviour. And what are we doing to try and intercept that type of behaviour at a younger age? So I'm not talking about the teens, I'm talking younger than yourselves. And also, I've put down here, challenge support to victims, because I know that there are several child victims that do fall through the net and don't get the support that they need. And my true belief, having witnessed this, is that if you're damaging children when they're younger, that damage will go on to create a society, a cost in the future. So if you intercept that damage at an early age, then you won't have that high cost later on in life. So 2 questions there. Are we looking at traits of younger children under teens? And I'm challenging the support for victims of crime, particularly young people, particularly young children, actually. And I will tell you that there used to be a scheme here in Plymouth where we used to look after children from 5 until 10 at the NSPCC, who used to support children in the court process and support them afterwards in getting through the trauma of having to live through the evidence that they've given in a court under special measures.
Thank you, Councillor Beard. Ian, do you have anything for that?
So we work with children from the age of 10 to 18. And that's what the legislation says we have to, and that's what we're funded to do. However, I think it's a really good point. My wife was a former school teacher, and she could tell me really accurately children who are going to come and work with me later on and intervene. Now, what we have got is the targeted support service going into schools and trying to identify these families earlier and these children earlier, and trying to put interventions in place to try and help and prevent that behaviour from escalating to us. But we are seeing younger and younger children committing more and more serious offences, particularly boys around county lines. We're seeing boys being identified at school, at junior schools a lot earlier in the city. So we are trying to do that through targeted support and not through the Youth Justice Service, because we're not funded to work with those children in that way, but we are doing those pieces of work. And in terms of Councillor B's second question around, I think it was the first question about victims and victims slipping through, 100% right, and that's why we're now being challenged for the first time. In fact, we've just got new inspection criteria that started this year, where we have to show the work that we're doing with victims. We were never asked to do work in the past. And now we've got to offer a similar standard to what we offer to the young people who have committed offences. Morally, it's exactly the right thing to do. So now all of our victims are contacted. And like I said earlier on, around working with the Police and Crime Commissioner, we're looking at how we can commission services better as well, to find out there's 20 services, agencies in the city working with children who are victims. And for the Youth Justice Service not to know around, well, one of them. We were only aware of one of those services before. And so we're looking at how we can commission these services better to align with the victims that we're seeing as well, and not be commissioned. I mean, there's pots of money out there that the Police and Crime Commissioner have spent and had nobody take up those offers. So we need to be better at working with those victims and identifying them better.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'm really, really sorry to cut you. We are running considerably over. Rocky, did you have a quick point you wanted to make?
Ian, you were talking about group work earlier that you were going to go put in schools. Could you potentially look at quality testing that in Youth Parliament? Because we could give you a good idea about the quality of your workshops specifically for young people. And I think that if you're going to take it into the school because you're so unsure about everything else in this picture, because you're right, it is a developing picture, you run the risk of damaging relationships between young girls and services if you get this wrong. So I think could we organise it to get it quality tested?
We can certainly put that to everybody. And I do wonder as well, with what Councillor Beer has said, and Ian, what you have brought forward as well, that there is that whole thread that runs through everything we've spoken about today, that team around the family, that early help intervention, and whether or not we could maybe look at that moving forward, David, I don't know if we could recommend
And we
something.
can certainly bring forward a report in the next cycle in relation to the issues and the challenge that you raised about younger children under 10. So to be looking at what provision have we in the city where we are identifying that those children are starting to get involved in those criminal behaviours at an earlier age. So I think that's something for us to consider across the city and with our Safer partnership, as well as through Children's Services, so we can bring that forward to
Chair,
next
sorry to
meeting.
interrupt, but I also think we ought to include sexual offences for younger children because they explore things in a different way, and sometimes they take that too far, and it's stopping those behaviours at that early age, which I think is critically important, and educating them at that early age to be able to understand what is right and what is wrong, because that is a criminal offence, isn't it, on its own. So I think sexual exploitation in those younger children is really important. You know, it's my passion.
I do, and I share it. But I think that the point that I was trying to make, Councillor Beer and David, was that all of those things work in that early help team around the family. It's not specifically, I don't feel, I work with 10 to 18 and there is a massive gap underneath that across the whole, like it's not Plymouth, it's across the board. And so it is a bugbear, it is a frustration, but it is that it's not necessarily targeted at one specific thing. It is a whole approach that's needed, I think. So if we could go with that, that would be amazing. I am really very sorry, Sienna. Okay.
Just leading on to what Councillor Beer said, could we maybe work with kids in schools across all ages to work on the issue of child-on-child sexual assault? A lot of that people just don't pay attention to, and it's not important, and it's just children being children. Could we maybe work with the Youth Justice Service or work with other organisations to bring that awareness into school?
Can I suggest that we take that through the young safeguarders that are aligned to the Children's Safeguarding Board? Because the Children's Safeguarding Board, I mentioned one work stream around domestic abuse earlier in the meeting. One of their 4 work streams is around child sexual abuse, which includes work on child-to-child sexual abuse or sexual violence. So if we take that through there again in that way, and I think you've raised some really good points about different ways of engaging with the Youth Parliament, and we can take those forward and pick those up.
Thank you very much. We are going to go past 5 o'clock, so if anybody does need to leave, that is absolutely okay. Thank you. Stuart. Right. Oh, could I just bring to everyone's attention that Ian is actually retiring?
That's not allowed.
Well, so what are we going to do now? They're not answering.
I don't know about you, but I'm going to go off and enjoy myself.
Fabulous, fantastic. Thank you.
But thank you for that.
Thank you very much for coming, guys. I'll see you at some point soon. Sienna, send me an email. And thank you so much for coming from everybody here. Okay, moving on to item 11, family homes for Plymouth children. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Lang, and I was going to say report as read, but Councillor Lang is very passionate and about this, so I'm going to
I am, but I actually do think we've discussed quite a lot of this report in other bits of the meeting. The things I would draw your attention to are the first Mockingbird model, which is launched, and we've got a plan for 3 more, which is very exciting. We're making really good progress improving our offer and our support for our kinship carers and our special guardians, and we're really hoping that will have an impact in terms of tackling our number of suitable placements for young people that actually, you know, they can go and be supported by somebody they already know, that they might be related to, a family friend. Those, they don't have to leave their networks, they have to leave their school. That's really important work, and actually is something that is featured in the Children and Wellbeing Bill as well. So there's attention on that from the government at national level. Our first children's home is on track to be open later this year, with more to follow. You know, that again is about creating more provision in the city, so that we can have children in Plymouth who want to be in Plymouth. It will hopefully tackle some of our budget pressure, but that is not entirely about that anyway. It's about having more provision in our city and more control over that provision. Yeah, so there's progress in all the 6 priority areas of this plan. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all the officers, because actually, you know, it sounds simple buying a home and setting it. It's not simple, it's really hard work. And all the cabinet members across the country who I've spoken to who are doing this have said that to me. You know, there are bumps in the road, it's difficult, it's tricky, but I haven't at any point thought it's not the right thing to do. So yeah, so those are the main points that I would draw your attention to in the report, but we have covered quite a lot of where we are with it in other items on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lang. Are there any questions on this item? No? Please do.
I just wanted to say congratulations to the whole team. Like, when I read this report, it was probably I can't really have a favourite, but it kind of was, because it's just that we are our children's corporate parent, we should provide them a home, and so being able to do that is just brilliant. The work here is fantastic, so just thank you so much. You've done so well.
It has
Just
been.
endorse that
And
too.
to Vivian too, because I know it's been a real labour of love, hasn't it? Okay, well, we move on to tracking decisions. Can we note that report? Is everyone happy?
And could I add one last thing, very quickly? That this has become like a whole council priority. I just think it's really important to say that. And we talked about silos earlier in a different part. Getting this done and this work done is involving people from across the council who really want to see it delivered. And I think that's quite important to say that. It's not just a children's thing. Everybody wants this to work, and everybody's pitching in to make sure it does.
That's true. And if anyone's seen our leader tear up at the video, anytime he sees it, we'll know that it's in everybody's heart. Moving on to the work programme. Councillor Beer.
Yes, you remember when I first sat on this committee at the beginning of the municipal year, and I begged you never to let child sexual exploitation or exploitation of children ever to fall off the agenda. It needs to be on the agenda every year. I'm not going to be here every year, sad to say, but some might be pleased about that. But it needs to be on this agenda, and we need to be talking about it forever.
So we do have a yearly report, don't we? And that will continue to happen, I'm assured. Councillor Beer.
My second ask is on school readiness, because I'm getting more and more issues regarding school readiness coming to myself in particular. And it's flagged quite a picture for me, and I've asked some probing questions, haven't I, David? Because what people need to be aware of is that we've got children starting school at 4.5, who aren't toilet trained. So who changes their nappies during the lesson times? It has to be the teachers or the teaching assistants, which should be there providing the education to the children, not doing that personal care. So school readiness is important.
That's okay. We will put school readiness on the work programme, Councillor Beer. Councillor Maclay, did you note the social media? Can I also ask for, as it didn't come today, the empowerment programme, please? Anything else, Councillor Gilmore?
It has just referred to something that I've been thinking about on and off during this meeting, but I couldn't find a moment to say it. Not just personal care, but I was reading in the newspaper that one issue of school readiness is children who can't use a book, they can't turn a page. There's a whole host of additional aspects to it beyond the toilet training, and it's quite
Sure starts the answer.
Yeah, I know.
Amen to that.
Amen.
I mean, back in the day, of course, you know, you will remember when your children were younger that actually you couldn't go to school unless they'd been toilet trained. You couldn't go to playgroup unless they'd been toilet trained. So I think it's a really important thing to do is to ensure that children are trained properly. But you're quite right. There are other aspects like eating, like sharing, all those sorts of things that involve school readiness, which is really important. And we need to be talking about it year on year. So the two things I ask you to do is school readiness and child sexual exploitation. Thank you.
That's absolutely fine. I do. I'm very rarely political, and I'm sorry if this does come out that way. But I do think that there is the whole early help team around the family. Families are struggling. Families have been struggling for a long time, and I do believe that somewhere along the line, this is down to how things have progressed over the last few years. That's the only time you're ever going to hear me say something about, you know, stretching families to a limit. Yes. Can I just say thank you? We never know if we're going to be in this position next year, so I don't know if I'll be sitting in this chair next year. It's been good fun, always, Terry. She tells me I'm fun. I like it. I like hearing it, so you can all say it if you like. And I thank you very, very much. I thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure. And if there is, we had a debrief last year. I'm not going to suggest one this year, but if there is anything that you think we could have done better, anything that you thought we did well, I'd be really interested to know those things. Jake will write something up and it will go into a paper. So is there anything anyone else to say? Chris?
And I think thank you to you.
Oh. You are free.